My eldest son stared me straight in the eye at Thanksgiving dinner and snarled, "Stop asking for money, Dad. It's pathetic. You're broke. Everyone knows that." My heart froze. He thought I was exhausted and out of my mind. But my arrogant son didn't know that I had set up a failsafe 3 years ago. At midnight, I executed the failsafe order. By the time my arrogant son woke up for Black Friday morning, his entire business account was frozen solid. This morning my phone rang frantically in his chaos, but it was all too late. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. Before we dive in, drop a quick comment for me. What's the weather like where you are right now? Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Some details in this story have been fictionalized for reflection and storytelling. What truly matters is the lesson it carries. The email arrived at 7:03 on Thanksgiving morning, and I read it 3 times before the words stopped rearranging themselves into something I could accept. Account frozen. International security audit. 30 days minimum. $20,400,000 locked behind a wall of compliance protocols I'd spent 40 years designing into other people's circuits. I sat at my Hill Country Ranch kitchen table, 15 acres of Texas limestone and live oak that Eleanor and I bought in 1998, and did what I always do when a system fails. I mapped the problem. At 64, I'd been a principal engineer at Texas Instruments, long enough to understand that every critical system needs a failsafe. The root cause was simple. Nova One's patent renewal fee, $50,000, was due in 48 hours. The Cayman account that held my retirement, my IP licensing fees, and 3 decades of careful saving was now inaccessible until December 23rd. The workaround was equally simple and infinitely more expensive. I would have to ask my son for help. Not Hendrix, Wayne. I poured cold coffee into the sink and watched it spiral down the drain the way certainty does when you realize you've already lost. The patent was Eleanor's Legacy Nova One, named after the car she drove when we met in 1907, a smart city infrastructure design I developed in my garage after she died. If I missed the renewal deadline, I knew exactly who I could ask. Wayne had the cash his construction company in Westlake Hills pulled 7 figures annually, and I'd personally guaranteed the $500,000 business loan that made it possible. He'd promised to pay me back by Christmas. That was 3 years ago. But I also knew the price I'd pay for making that call. Wayne didn't loan money. He collected debts. The calculation was methodical, engineer-minded, the kind of logic tree I'd taught both my sons when they were young enough to think their father knew everything. Branch 1 call. Wayne asked for 50,000, endure whatever humiliation he'd extract in exchange. Branch 2 let Nova 1 expire, lose Eleanor's legacy, spend the rest of my life wondering if I'd given up too easily. I chose Branch 1. The Thanksgiving invitation had arrived 2 weeks earlier, Wayne's annual performance at the McMansion he'd built in Westlake Hills. All designer excess and carefully curated gratitude. I'd planned to skip it to spend the day alone with Eleanor's memory and a turkey sandwich. But now the invitation became leverage. You don't ask your son for money over the phone. You ask him at his own table in front of his wife with witnesses who'll remember what was said. I arrived at 3:07 in the afternoon. Wayne's house sat on a cul-de-sac of identical privilege, each home trying to out-luxury the next, with columns and 3-car garages and professionally landscaped indifference. His oak dining table could seat 12. Today it seated 4. Wayne Norris, 34. My eldest son, the one who'd inherited my jaw, and Eleanor's ambition, and none of our restraint, carved the turkey with the confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences. His custom Rolex caught the light every time he moved the knife. I'd co-signed the loan for that watch too, back when I still believed that helping your children meant saying yes. Hendrix Norris sat across from me, 26, an already senior developer at a promising Austin tech startup, with the stillness of someone watching a slow-motion disaster he'd predicted for years. He'd warned me about Wayne 3 Thanksgivings ago. I hadn't listened. Gwendolyn Norris, 33. Wayne's wife, law school dropout turned stay-at-home observer, sat at the far end of the table, with the careful attention of someone who'd stopped asking questions months ago, but never stopped noticing answers. Have you ever sat at a table with someone who thinks they've already won? They carve the turkey with theatrical precision. They pour wine into crystal that costs more than your monthly utilities. They talk about gratitude while mentally calculating how much everyone owes them. I waited until Wayne finished carving. Waited until Gwendolyn passed the sweet potatoes. Waited until Hendrix served himself green beans with the mechanical efficiency of someone trying not to make eye contact. Then I said it. Quietly, politely, the way engineers phrase requests when they already know the answer will hurt. Wayne, I wanted to ask about the $500,000 guarantee. The one from 22. You'd mentioned paying it back by Christmas. He didn't look up. The knife kept moving through white meat, precise and controlled. That was a gift, Dad. We talked about this. We didn't talk about it, I said. You promised to pay it back. I have the text messages. Gwendolyn's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Wayne set down the carving knife, looked at me for the first time since I'd arrived, and I saw it not cruelty, not even malice. Absolute certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from believing your own story so completely that facts become optional. Dad, his voice was patient, like explaining compound interest to a child. You need to stop. I need $50,000, I said. The patent renewal is due Saturday. If you can't pay back the full amount, I just need... Stop. Hendrix shifted in his chair. I saw his jaw tighten. Wayne leaned back, Rolex gleaming. Don't ask for money anymore, Dad. It's pathetic. You're broke. We all know it. Don't pretend anymore. This was the moment I should have stood up and left. But parents don't leave their children even when they should. Even when the cost of staying is watching your son perform your humiliation like dinner theater for an audience of 3. Gwendolyn turned pale. This wasn't the first time she'd heard her husband say those words. I could see it in the way she carefully set down her fork, in the way her eyes found the table and stayed there. Hendrix stood up abruptly, fists clenched. I raised my hand slightly, signaling him to sit. He didn't. But I kept looking at Wayne, at my eldest son, at the man I'd taught to ride a bike and balance a checkbook and treat people with dignity. What I saw in his eyes wasn't cruelty. It was absolute certainty that he was right, and that certainty killed everything else in me. I left before Hendrix could say whatever he was about to say, before Gwendolyn could look at me with that careful pity, before Wayne could add another word to the performance he'd just delivered. The drive back to the ranch took 23 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't roll down the windows, just drove through the hill country darkness, with my hands at 10 and 2, and my mind doing what it always does when a system fails running diagnostics on a problem that had no solution. I sat in the darkness of my bedroom for 3 hours. Eleanor's photograph caught the moonlight. I picked it up, traced the frame's edge with my thumb. Before I understood what rage felt like when it's too cold to burn, I didn't turn on the lights, didn't change out of the khakis and flannel shirt I'd worn to Wayne's performance. Just sat on the edge of the bed Eleanor and I had shared for 32 years, staring at her face in the silver frame on the nightstand. 1987, the year we met at a Texas Instruments holiday party. She was wearing a red dress and holding a calculator, and I'd fallen in love with someone who understood that numbers don't lie even when people do. I'm sorry, I told her photograph. I'm going to lose your name. The numbers ran through my mind like a failed equation. 50,000 needed. 20 million locked. 48 hours remaining. 0 solutions. I'd already mapped every possibility during the drive home. Credit cards max from Eleanor's medical bills 2 years ago. Home equity line tapped for Hendrix's college before the tech job came through. No relatives with that kind of cash sitting idle on a holiday weekend. The bank would laugh at a bridge loan request filed at 9 p.m. on Thanksgiving. Nova 1 was more than just microchips and patents. It was the final piece of Eleanor I had left. We had spent her last months together modeling its framework while her health faded. If I couldn't clear the renewal fee by Saturday's deadline, the continuous negotiations with Lockheed Martin would instantly vanish, stripping away the future she worked so hard to secure for us. I didn't cry. Engineers don't cry over solvable problems. But this one wasn't solvable. For the first time in 40 years of designing systems, debugging circuits, building fail-safes into every project I touched, I had no workaround. No backup plan, no clever solution that would arrive at 3 a.m. when my subconscious finally processed all the variables. I just had Wayne's voice in my head. You're broke, we all know it. Don't pretend anymore. And the worst part, the part that made the cold rage settle into my chest like ice, was that he'd said it with absolute certainty. Not cruelty, not even malice, just the calm confidence of someone stating an obvious fact to a room of people who already knew it. My eldest son believed I was pathetic, and tonight, staring at the numbers that wouldn't add up no matter how many times I recalculated them, I was starting to believe he was right. Eleanor's photograph caught the moonlight. I picked it up, traced the frame's edge with my thumb. "I tried," I whispered. "I really did." The phone buzzed. In 3 hours of darkness, that buzz was the first sound I'd heard besides my own breathing. I almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail. But the screen showed Hendrix's name, and something in my engineer's mind said, "One more data point won't hurt." I pressed answer. "Yeah." "Dad?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Background noise suggested a parking lot, distant traffic. "It's me. Don't say anything, just listen." I listened. "I'm at the H-E-B on South Lamar. I just sold my Mustang. 2019, the one I bought after my first year at the startup. Guy I know does use cars, met me here after I called him during dessert. Clean title, fair price." My chest tightened. "Plus my savings," Hendrix continued. "3 years of it. Every bonus, every stock option. I didn't cash every dollar I put away thinking I'd buy a house someday." I tried to speak. Couldn't. "Exactly $50,000, he said. "I wired it 20 minutes ago to the Nova One renewal account. You can pay the fee tomorrow. It'll clear by Saturday morning." The moonlight through the window blurred. I realized my eyes were wet. "Son, don't," Hendrix said. His voice was steady, but I could hear the weight behind it. "The cost. Just pay it on time. That's all Mom would want." My throat closed. Not from sadness, from the weight of understanding which son had learned what love actually costs. "Hendrix, you didn't have to—" "Yeah, I did." He exhaled long and slow. Wayne got up from that table like he'd won something, like calling his father pathetic in front of his wife was some kind of victory. And I sat there thinking about Mom, about how she would have looked at both of us tonight. I pressed my palm against my eyes. "This isn't your responsibility. Mom's name is on that patent," he said quietly. "That makes it exactly my responsibility. Drive safe tomorrow. Don't speed. Pay the fee before noon." The line went dead. I sat holding the phone long after he hung up, staring at Eleanor's photograph in the moonlight. The red dress. The calculator. The woman who taught both our sons that numbers don't lie, and that love isn't about what you say at a dinner table. It's about what you do in a parking lot at midnight, when no one's watching. I wanted to tell Hendrix this wasn't his responsibility, that he shouldn't have sacrificed 3 years of his life for my mistake. But I didn't, because I knew tonight Eleanor was watching, and she would have been proud of exactly one of her sons. I didn't sleep after Hendrix hung up. I sat with Eleanor's photograph for another 13 minutes, feeling the weight of what my younger son had just given up. Then I stood, walked to my home office, opened my laptop, and did what engineers do when the problem finally becomes clear. I executed the solution I'd designed 3 years ago. I activated the guarantee contract clause at 12:17 a.m., exactly 30 minutes after Hendrix hung up, and now, at 6:47 on Black Friday morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I stood in the Hill Country Ranch kitchen watching November light break through the fog, measuring coffee grounds with the precision Eleanor had taught me 40 years ago. 22 grams. Exactly. The phone lit up on the counter beside the French press collar ID, showed Wayne in white letters against the black screen. I let it ring. The grinder whirred for 18 seconds. I'd counted the time so many mornings that my internal clock knew when to stop without checking. Water heated to 195 degrees. Fahrenheit, not boiling, never boiling, because boiling water burns the grounds, and Eleanor said burned coffee was an insult to the beans. The phone buzzed again. "Wayne. Second call in 3 minutes." I poured the water in a slow spiral, watching the grounds bloom, steam rising with that smell of morning ritual and controlled routine. 4 minutes steep. I set the timer on the microwave and looked at my phone. 3 missed calls now. Eleanor used to say, "The calm you show when chaos arrives is the measure of your preparation." She'd said it when I lost my first job at 26, when her cancer came back the second time when Wayne dropped out of college to start his construction company on borrowed money. I wasn't calm because I was strong. I was calm because I'd spent 3 years preparing for this moment. 4 missed calls. I pressed the plunger down slowly, feeling the resistance, hearing the grounds compress. First cup poured into the ceramic mug Eleanor bought me in 1993, the one that said "World's Most Patient Engineer" in faded letters. 5 missed calls. I took the first sip. Still too hot, but perfect. The kind of perfect that comes from doing the same thing the same way every morning, until muscle memory takes over and your hands know what your mind hasn't finished thinking. You might think this is about money. It's not. It's about teaching a man who's never faced consequences what an engineer's precision looks like when applied to justice. 6 missed calls. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd read the account freeze notification yesterday morning, and let myself remember last night. 12:17 a.m. Laptop open to the guarantee contract portal, the one Wayne had never accessed in 3 years, because men who don't read 40-page documents certainly don't log in to check the fine print. Section 7 clause. 3 subsection B. Primary account holder may request emergency audit of all linked accounts upon reasonable suspicion of fraudulent cash flow asset, misrepresentation, or material misuse of guaranteed funds. Request triggers automatic 30-day freeze on all accounts bearing guarantee liability until audit completion. Processing time 6 hours 30 minutes from submission. I'd written that clause myself. Wayne had signed it without reading. I clicked submit at exactly 12:17 a.m. The system sent automated notifications to 3 banks, the one holding his company's operating account, the one processing his credit cards, the one managing his home equity line. Processing time 6 hours 30 minutes, which meant at 6:47 a.m. on Black Friday, the single biggest sales day of the year for a construction company selling custom home builds to people with disposable income, Wayne's accounts had frozen solid. 7 missed calls. I poured the second cup. Steam rose in a thin column catching the morning light. Outside, the hill country fog was burning off, revealing the live oaks Eleanor and I had planted in 2001, the year Hendrix was born. 8 missed calls. I knew what was happening in Westlake Hills right now. Wayne was staring at his phone, watching his company's Black Friday email. Campaign land in 3,000 inboxes, watching potential clients click, schedule consultation, watching his payment processing system throw error messages because the merchant account was frozen. His credit cards would decline at the coffee shop. His business account overdraft protection would fail. His automatic payments, mortgage, car lease, country club membership would bounce. 9 missed calls. Watching those calls stack up was like watching circuit breakers trip in sequence. Each one I'd designed, each one firing exactly on schedule. 10 missed calls. 11, 12. I'd spent 40 years at Texas Instruments designing fail-safes into critical systems. Redundancies, backup protocols, the kind of engineering that keeps satellites from falling and power grids from collapsing and billion-dollar projects from failing because someone forgot to account for the scenario everyone said would never happen. I'd applied that same engineering to a 40-page guarantee contract in 2022 when Wayne asked me to co-sign his business expansion loan. He'd called it just a formality, said his lawyer had reviewed it, said it was standard. What he didn't know was that I'd drafted the entire document myself, hired my own attorney to make it legal, and presented it to his bank as the only version I'd sign. The bank didn't care. They just wanted my assets as collateral. Wayne didn't care. He just wanted the money. Nobody read it, but I'd written it. Every word, every clause, every fail-safe. 7 layers deep. 13 missed calls. 14. I took another sip of coffee, the second cup still hot, still perfect, and looked out the kitchen window at hill country fog burning off in morning sun. My phone buzzed again. 15. I thought about Hendrix in an H-E-B parking lot at midnight, signing over the title to his Mustang. Thought about Wayne at his mahogany dinner table, carving turkey with a Rolex on his wrist, calling his father pathetic. The 16th call came at 7:53. I didn't answer that one either. I took my coffee to the back porch, settled into the cedar chair Eleanor and I bought at an estate sale in 2006, and opened my old engineering notebook, the one where I sketched solutions to problems before they're fully formed. What I didn't know while I was sitting there watching hill country fog burn off the live oaks was that 8 miles away in Westlake Hills, Gwendolyn was about to find something that would change everything. She told me about it 3 days later when she finally worked up the courage to call. Her voice was steady, almost clinical, the way lawyers sound when they're describing evidence. I wasn't looking for proof when I searched Wayne's jacket pocket for car keys that morning, she said. I was looking for a way to get to Target before the Black Friday crowds, but the folded paper with the Cayman Islands account number found me instead. I'd asked her to tell me exactly what happened, every detail, because details matter when you're building a case. She'd been in their bedroom around 8:30. Wayne was in his study down the hall, shouting into his phone about frozen accounts, about bank errors, about incompetent processing systems that had clearly malfunctioned on the biggest sales day of the year. His voice carried through the McMansion's open floor plan, each word sharp with the kind of panic that comes from losing control. She needed car keys. His jacket was draped over the bedroom chair, the expensive wool blazer he'd worn to Thanksgiving dinner, the one with the Rolex in the inside pocket. She reached into the outer pocket, felt paper, pulled it out. A single sheet folded twice. She unfolded it. Account number, Cayman Islands routing codes. A handwritten name at the bottom, Tindra P. I'd seen that name before, she told me. 3 weeks earlier, I'd walked past Wayne's phone while he was in the shower. A text notification lit up the screen. Just a first name and a heart emoji. Tindra. I didn't say anything. Didn't ask. But I remembered. She photographed the paper with her phone. 6 seconds. Then she refolded it exactly as it had been thirds then in half and replaced it in the pocket precisely where she'd found it. Smoothed the jacket. Walked out of the bedroom. Simple action, she said, but each one felt like signing her own divorce papers. She didn't confront Wayne. Didn't demand explanations. Just drove to Target, bought what she needed, came home and started planning. I'm a law school dropout, she told me on that call, but I spent 2 years learning how to build a case before I left, and Wayne just handed me Exhibit A. While Gwendolyn was photographing that paper, I was sitting on my porch, looking at my own evidence page, 47 of my January 2022 engineering notebook, the page where I'd sketched modifications to a standard business loan guarantee contract. I remembered that day now, though I'd forgotten it for 3 years. 2 months after Eleanor's funeral. Wayne had called voice tight with that particular stress that comes from doors closing and opportunities slipping away. Dad, I need your signature on a guarantee. The bank wants collateral for the expansion loan. They trust your name, your credit. Just a formality. I was sitting in this same chair. The grief was still fresh enough that most days felt like moving through water. Eleanor had been dead 63 days. I was still finding her hair ties in the bathroom drawer, her reading glasses on the nightstand, her handwriting on the grocery list magnetized to the fridge. Of course, son, I'd said. Eleanor would want me to help you. But even in grief, I was still an engineer. Even numb, I was still capable of designing failsafes. I'd asked Wayne to email me the standard form. Spent 3 hours reading it. Then I'd opened a new document and started writing. My mind traced the architecture of that 40-page document. I had legally structured it to act as an automated trap, inserting emergency audit triggers that would protect my capital the moment material misrepresentation occurred. Wayne had been too blinded by greed to read the fine print, and now the fail-safes I'd drafted in my deepest grief were executing perfectly. My phone buzzed. Text message from Wayne. Call me now, emergency. I set the phone face down on the porch railing and looked out at the fog lifting, revealing the hill country I'd shared with Eleanor for 27 years. 17 missed calls now. And somewhere in Westlake Hills, Gwendolyn was staring at a photograph on her phone, reading a name she'd seen before and making her own plans. The text came Sunday afternoon. Family meeting, 6 p.m., important. No question mark. No please. Just a summons from my eldest son, who'd spent the last 3 days watching his accounts freeze and calling a father who wouldn't answer. I drove to Westlake Hills knowing exactly what Wayne had planned. An intervention. A carefully staged performance where he'd express concern about my mental health, my recent erratic behavior, my need for professional help. He'd have talking points, rehearsed compassion, Gwendolyn positioned as supporting witness. What he didn't have was control. Wayne had arranged his McMansion living room like a tribunal oak chairs in a semicircle facing the leather couch where I was clearly meant to sit. Prepared talking points, visible on his phone resting on the coffee table, Gwendolyn positioned as supporting witness. Except she was sitting 10 feet away from him, not beside him, and that told me everything. In marriage geography, 10 feet is a canyon. Hendrix leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, watching his brother with the kind of stillness that comes before action. He was wearing the faded Longhorns t-shirt from his college years jeans, with paint stains from helping me repair the ranch fence last summer. No attempt at formality. No pretense that this was anything other than what it was. Wayne wore a pressed Oxford shirt, khakis with a crease, the Rolex catching light from the designer lamps Gwendolyn had picked out when they'd renovated last year. Dad, Wayne gestured to the couch. Thanks for coming. We need to talk. I sat, didn't say anything, just waited. Wayne glanced at his phone, started his prepared speech. We're all here because we love you and we're worried about your recent behavior. The account issues the communication problems. You just say what you have to say, Wayne. Hendrix's voice cut across the room like a blade. Drop the script. Wayne's jaw tightened. I'm trying to approach this with compassion. Then be honest, Hendrix said. Tell Dad what this is really about. Tell him you're panicking because your accounts froze on Black Friday and you think he's responsible. Tell him you called this meeting to make him look unstable so you can claim he triggered the audit maliciously. Be honest. Gwendolyn shifted in her chair. I watched her watching Wayne, and I saw the moment she understood this intervention wasn't about me. It was about control. Wayne stood up. You don't know what you're talking about. $500,000? Hendrix pushed off the wall, started counting on his fingers like he was listing bugs in a code review. That's the guarantee you asked Dad to sign in January 2022. 2 months after Mom's funeral. 7 extensions over 3 years. Each time you promised to pay it back. Each time you didn't. That was a business arrangement. Your company survives because of Dad's signature, not your talent. Hendrix's voice was flat, methodical, the way engineers sound when they're stating facts that can't be argued. The bank doesn't trust you. They trust his name, his credit, his $20 million in assets backing your operation. I heard Gwendolyn's sharp intake of breath. She'd known about the guarantee. I'd seen her pale face at Thanksgiving when Wayne mentioned it. But maybe she hadn't known the full scope, the renewals, the broken promises, the dependency Wayne had built his entire business on. Watching Hendrix dismantle Wayne's reality was like watching a software engineer debug code line by line, methodical. No emotion, just facts until the program crashes. Last week, Hendrix continued. Dad's Cayman account froze. International audit, 30 days. And you were about to lose the Nova 1 patent because you needed money at that exact moment. The patent Mom helped design. The one with her name on it. Wayne's face had gone from red to white. How do you know about... I sold my car to save it. Hendrix's voice didn't change. Same flat tone, same precision. 2019 Mustang, plus 3 years of savings, $50,000 exactly. Wired it to the renewal account Thursday night while you were sleeping off your Thanksgiving turkey. Gwendolyn stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the Westlake Hills cul-de-sac with its identical mansions and perfect lawns, and families that probably weren't fracturing in their living rooms on Sunday evenings. So this is what tonight is really about, Hendrix said. You think Dad triggered the account freeze deliberately? Think he's sabotaging you because you called him pathetic at dinner, and you want to paint him as mentally unstable so when the bank investigates, you can claim he's not competent to make that request. Wayne's silence was answer enough. I sat still while my sons declared war on each other in my name, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt Eleanor's absence not as grief, but as relief she didn't have to witness this. You're making a choice right now, Wayne said quietly. His voice had changed, gone cold in a way I'd never heard before. You just chose a side, Hendrix. My youngest son looked at his older brother without blinking, voice steady as bedrock. I made my choice long ago, Wayne. Today is just the first time you've seen it. The silence that followed felt like the moment after a circuit breaks, that suspended instant before the backup systems engage or the whole grid goes dark. Hendrix turned toward the door, paused, looked at me. Dad, you coming? I stood up. Across the room, Gwendolyn turned from the window, looked at her husband, then at me. Then she stood too. Wayne sat alone in his carefully arranged tribunal phone, still displaying his prepared talking points. Intervention collapsed like a house of cards built on lies. I walked to the door, stopped, looked back at my eldest son. It has everything to do with the clause in the guarantee contract, the one you signed without reading the one I wrote myself. Ask your attorney to find it. It's not hard to spot. Wayne stared. See you in 30 days, I said, when the audit completes. I walked out. Hendrix followed. Behind us, I heard Gwendolyn say something to Wayne, too quiet to make out the words, but the tone was clear enough. She wasn't asking permission to leave. She was telling him she was done. I drove home Sunday night thinking about how families fracture, not all at once like breaking glass, but slowly, fault line by fault line, until the final earthquake just reveals what's been splitting apart for years. Hendrix followed me back to the ranch. We sat on the porch drinking coffee until midnight, not talking much, just being present in the silence that comes after declarations of war. What I didn't know while we were sitting there was that Wayne was already planning his retaliation. Monday morning, 7 a.m., and my eldest son was already on the phone destroying his youngest brother's future. I just didn't know it yet. Hendrix told me about it later after he'd pieced together what happened. How Wayne sat in his downtown Austin office at dawn, looking at his contact list, calculating which relationships he could weaponize. How he'd landed on Vernon Romero. Vernon Romero. 38, 3 years into his role as TechFlow Innovations HR Director. Old Sigma Chi fraternity brother from UT Austin. The kind of friend you call when you need something done quietly, when the official channels won't work, when you need someone who owes you. And Vernon owed Wayne. The call lasted 4 minutes. Hendrix found out about it weeks later from someone who'd been in the TechFlow break room, overheard Vernon on his cell, heard enough to piece together what was happening. Vernon, it's Wayne Norris. Professional tone. Nothing threatening yet. Remember that 2019 audit report you signed without reading? Appendix D, the one for the Westlake Construction Compliance Review. Silence on Vernon's end. The kind of silence that means, yes, I remember, and I've been waiting 6 years for this call. I have the original, Wayne said, with your signature, certifying numbers you never actually reviewed. The kind of thing that ends HR careers when it surfaces during litigation. Vernon's response was barely audible. What do you want? My younger brother Hendrix interviews with TechFlow this week. Senior developer position. You know what to do. Another silence. Longer this time. What exactly are you asking me to do? Vernon's voice, according to the breakroom observer, sounded hollow. I think you know exactly what I'm asking. Vernon hung up, sat at his desk for 3 minutes, hands shaking. Then he opened Hendrix's candidate file in the HR system and typed a single line in the internal notes field. Concerns flagged by external source. Recommend rejection, regardless of technical performance. 4 minutes to destroy a career. 43 keystrokes to sabotage a brother. The distance between Wayne making that call and me opening my email at the ranch was 30 miles and an entire moral universe. I was sitting at my kitchen table, same cedar table, where Eleanor and I used to do our taxes, when the notification came through. Subject line, patent renewal, confirmation, U.S. patent 9847332, Nova 1. Paid in full, deadline met, patent secure for another cycle. $50,000 Hendrix had sacrificed. His Mustang, 3 years of savings. All to save a name he probably didn't fully understand the significance of. But I did. I clicked the patent number, pulled up the full registration. Inventor Alfred James Norris. Co-contributor Eleanor Marie Norris. Filed March 2017. Patent name Nova 1. Smart infrastructure semiconductor design. March 2017, Texas Instruments Austin Lab, 2 a.m. on a Thursday. Eleanor wasn't supposed to be there. She was an accountant. Not an engineer, worked in the building next door managing licensing agreements. But she'd stayed late helping me model the revenue projections for the patent application, and when I got stuck on the final documentation page, she'd walked over with 2 cups of terrible breakroom coffee. The patent name field sat blank on my screen. I'd been staring at it for 20 minutes. What will you name it? She asked, setting the coffee beside my keyboard. I don't know. It's just a chip? It's never just a chip. She tilted her head, looking at the technical diagrams I'd spread across 3 monitors. What does it do? Manages power distribution in smart city infrastructure, prevents cascade failures, keeps systems running when everything else is trying to shut down. Eleanor smiled, the smile that had made me fall in love with her at a holiday party in 1987, the smile that meant she'd already solved a problem I hadn't figured out I had. Nova, she said. Nova, like a star exploding, shining once and never truly fading. Even after it's gone, the light keeps traveling. People see it for years afterward, not knowing the star is already dead. I typed it Nova 1. Perfect, Eleanor said. Eleanor had named it Nova because stars explode once and shine forever. She just didn't know she was describing herself. She died 18 months later, pancreatic cancer stage, 4 diagnosis to funeral in 7 months. But the patent lived, and now Hendrix had saved it. I looked at the renewal confirmation one more time. Paid in full. Patent secure. Hendrix's name wasn't on it, but his sacrifice was woven into every line of that document, now as permanent as the patent itself. I whispered to her photograph, Honey, our youngest son just saved your name. I won't let it be lost again. What I didn't know yet, sitting there in my kitchen with weak Monday morning sunlight coming through the window, was that 30 miles away, Wayne had just made a phone call that would try to take everything else from Hendrix instead. I didn't know about Vernon Romero. Didn't know about the 2019 audit report, or the blackmail, or the candidate file notation that would kill Hendrix's interview before it started. I was still operating on Sunday night's timeline, thinking the war had been declared, but not yet engaged. I was wrong. Wayne had already fired the first shot. And across town, someone I'd never met, someone Wayne had blackmailed 6 years ago and been controlling ever since, was typing the 43 keystrokes that would prove my eldest son had learned nothing about consequences, only how to make other people pay them. I spent Monday morning with Eleanor's photograph, grateful for what Hendrix had saved, not yet knowing what Wayne had already destroyed. Tuesday I drove to Home Depot for fence posts, came home, worked on the ranch until my hands ached. Simple problems, physical solutions, the kind of work that doesn't require thinking about sons who betray each other. What I didn't know was that Tuesday afternoon, while I was digging post holes, Gwendolyn was sitting in a South Congress cafe systematically dismantling the last illusions of her marriage. She told me about it 3 weeks later when everything else had already fallen apart, and we were both trying to piece together the timeline of how the war had escalated. She'd saved screenshots, printed them out, brought them to me in a manila folder like evidence in a trial. The Cayman account number, she said, took me 47 minutes to trace from the paper in Wayne's pocket to an Instagram account with 4,000 followers and a Hermes bag that cost more than our first car. She'd chosen a quiet cafe. Corner table in the back laptop, open chai latte cooling beside her while she worked. Not the kind of place Wayne's friends would go, not the kind of place anyone would recognize her. She'd started with the account number she'd photographed, 8472-9394-2847. Entered it into every corporate registry database she could access, the law school dropout skills she'd mentioned, the 2 years of legal research training before she'd left to marry Wayne. Cayman Islands accounts don't advertise their owners, but they connect to other things: LLC registrations, business filings, addresses that appear in multiple documents. She found it in a Nevada LLC registry. C. Jenkins LLC, sole director. Formed March 2023. March 2023, she told me, pointing to the date on the printout. That's when I stopped asking questions. When I convinced myself the distance between us was just marriage settling into routine. I even remember the day I decided to stop caring where he was on Thursday nights. The LLC had an address in Henderson, Nevada. One of those mail forwarding services that exists solely to give corporations a registered agent without revealing anything real. But it also had promotional materials. A website that had been active for 6 months before being taken down. And in those materials, a social media contact for business inquiries. Instagram handle Otindra Perry. Gwendolyn had stared at that name on her screen for a full minute before clicking it. The Instagram account loaded. Public. 4,200 followers. And there she was. Gwendolyn scrolled through posts. Restaurants she'd never heard of. Weekend trips to Fredericksburg and Marfa. A November photo at Hamilton Pool with a caption about escaping the city. Luxury items photographed with professional lighting designer. Bags, jewelry, shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She'd screenshotted each one, noted the dates, cross-referenced them with her own calendar, with Wayne's travel schedule, with the credit card statements she'd stopped examining closely a year ago because ignorance felt safer than confirmation. Patterns emerged. Weeks Wayne claimed he was in San Antonio for client meetings. Weekends he said he was playing golf with business partners. Thursday nights that became standing commitments to networking events. But it was the October 14th post that ended whatever rationalizations Gwendolyn had left. A Hermes Birkin. Bag. Caramel leather gold hardware sitting on white marble countertop with perfect natural lighting. Caption: gift from someone special. Gwendolyn had pulled up her phone calendar. October 14th, 2025. Tuesday. Wayne's overnight trip to San Antonio for the Valley Builders Association conference. She'd opened their shared credit card account. Scrolled back to October. No Hermes charge. Those bags don't appear on statements when they're purchased with offshore account transfers. But she'd kept scrolling. Found August. August 12th. W. Austin Hotel, downtown. $847 for one night. I'd rationalized that bill. She told me, her voice clinical, like she was describing someone else's marriage. Told myself clients sometimes require nice hotels. That maybe the company was paying him back, and I just hadn't seen the reimbursement yet. But you can't rationalize a Hermes bag with a timestamp. A Birkin bag costs $12,000. Minimum. The waiting lists run years long unless you're a VIP client or you pay premium. October 14th, the San Antonio trip that wasn't to San Antonio. Gwendolyn had closed the laptop, sat with her cold chai latte looking out at South Congress afternoon traffic. Dog walkers, couples holding hands, people living lives where the biggest decision was whether to get tacos or Thai food for dinner. She didn't cry. She'd finished crying 3 weeks earlier, she told me, when she'd found that W. Austin bill and convinced herself there was a reasonable explanation. When she'd chosen to believe her husband because believing was easier than knowing. Now she had 4,000 reasons to stop lying to herself. A $12,000 designer bag with a public timestamp that proved Wayne thought she was stupid enough to never look. The only question left was whose side she chose when the war she'd been watching finally demanded she pick up a weapon. She'd paid for her chai latte in cash, deleted her browser history on the cafe's Wi-Fi, driven home to Westlake Hills, where Wayne was in his study on a conference call, yelling at someone about frozen accounts and bank incompetence. She'd walked past his study, smiled when he glanced up, went to the bedroom and transferred all her screenshots to a thumb drive that she hid in a box of tampons, in the master bathroom, the one place Wayne would never look. Then she'd started planning. I didn't know you then, she told me 3 weeks later, sitting in my ranch kitchen. Didn't know Hendrix had sold his car, or that Wayne had blackmailed someone at TechFlow, or that you'd written fail-safes into a contract 3 years ago. I just knew I had evidence of an affair and offshore money, and I needed to figure out whose side I was on and where I started. She'd started with the evidence, built the case like she'd been trained to do in law school before she'd dropped out to support Wayne's business dreams. And I'd started with something else entirely. While Gwendolyn was building her case against Wayne with Instagram screenshots and offshore account trails, I was building mine with something simpler, patience and a camera the size of a button. The psychiatrist Wayne hired to declare me incompetent arrived at exactly 10 a.m. Wednesday, clipboard in hand, and I'd been expecting him for 3 days. Hendrix had installed the camera on Sunday night after we'd driven back from the failed intervention. Motion activated. Hendrix had said positioning it on the bookshelf between Eleanor's collection of accounting textbooks and my old TI training manuals. Records to cloud storage. He'll never know it's there. How did you know Wayne would try this? I'd asked. Because it's what I do, Hendrix said. If I was desperate and running out of moves, discredit the person with the leverage. Make them look unstable. Get a doctor to sign something official. So when the doorbell rang Wednesday morning and I looked through the window at the middle-aged man in the department store suit holding a clipboard, I wasn't surprised. I was ready. I opened the door. Can I help you? Good morning. His smile was nervous rehearsed. I'm Dr. Marcus Fielding, psychiatrist. Your family asked me to conduct a routine wellness assessment. Just a formality. Nothing to worry about. Marcus Fielding. 43, according to the background check Hendrix had run after intercepting Wayne's email confirmation. Not actually a psychiatrist. Commercial insurance salesman from Pflugerville with a high school diploma and a mortgage 3 months behind. The kind of man who'd sign anything for $3,500 cash. Coffee, I asked. I just made a fresh pot. He hesitated. Probably not in the script. That would be lovely, thank you. I led him to the living room, seated him in the leather chair directly across from the bookshelf. Perfect camera angle, and poured 2 cups from the French press. So Fielding said, consulting his clipboard, this is just a standard cognitive assessment. Your son Wayne mentioned you've been under some stress recently. My son Wayne. I sipped my coffee. Which questions did he suggest you ask? Fielding blinked, recovered. Standard protocol. Can you tell me what year it is? December 2025, specifically the 11th, Wednesday. Patent renewal cycle day 43 since the November 29th confirmation. And who's the current president? I answered, then added the vice president, the governor of Texas, the mayor of Austin, and the date of the last municipal election. Fielding made a note, shifted in his seat. Can you count backward from 100 by sevens? I did, perfectly. Then continued in Spanish, which Eleanor had taught me then in binary, which I'd learned at TI. You might wonder how a man being attacked by his own son stays this calm. The answer is simple. I stopped being surprised by cruelty and started documenting it. Very good. Fielding's voice had gone flat. What about recent memory? Can you tell me what you had for breakfast? Oatmeal with blueberries. Same thing I've had every Wednesday for 8 years. Eleanor started the tradition. Said Wednesdays needed something to look forward to. And your patents? How many do you hold? 9 total. U.S. patent. 7234891. Issued March 2019. Novel semiconductor architecture using gallium nitride substrate. Co-inventor Eleanor Marie Norris, deceased August 2024. U.S. Patent 84452.9. Issued September 2020. Power distribution, failsafe for critical infrastructure. That's very detailed. Fielding interrupted. U.S. Patent 9123447 thermal management for high-density circuits. U.S. Patent 9847332. The Nova 1 Smart City Infrastructure Design filed March 2017, renewed November 2025. Would you like me to continue? I can recite the abstract for each one. Fielding put down his clipboard, looked at his coffee, didn't drink it. 20 minutes. That's how long it took for Wayne's $3,500 script to completely collapse against the reality that I was in fact perfectly competent. To be honest with you, Fielding said finally, I was paid to sign a certificate saying you have a cognitive impairment. I set down my coffee cup. By whom? Your son Wayne. $3,500. Half up front, half when I delivered the signed paperwork. And now, watching him confess was like watching a circuit fail under voltage. Testing, you apply pressure until the weak point reveals itself. Then you mark it in red. Now I don't know what to do, Fielding said. You're clearly not impaired. I can't sign something that's obviously false. But I need that money. I stood up, walked to the bookshelf, pointed. That camera, I said, recorded everything from the moment you walked in, including your name, the bribe amount, the fact that Wayne Norris hired you to commit fraud. Fielding's face went white. I'm not interested in destroying you, Mr. Fielding. Get yourself an attorney today, not tomorrow. Once you have one, have them contact Opal Dunn. Her number's on that card. Your window to cooperate closes at 5 p.m. Friday. I walked to my desk, pulled out a business card, handed it to him. Opal Dunn, attorney. You call her today. Tell her everything you just told me. Provide documentation of the payment Wayne made. When this goes to court, and will you testify truthfully about who hired you and why? And if I don't, then I send this footage straight to the district attorney and the police for criminal fraud and criminal impersonation. Your choice. Fielding looked at the card, at me, at the camera on the bookshelf. He said you were losing your mind, Fielding said quietly. Said you were a danger to yourself, that someone needed to intervene before you hurt someone. My son, I said, is a liar, and you just helped me prove it. Fielding left 10 minutes later with a blank piece of paper in his briefcase and Opal Dunn's business card in his pocket. I watched him drive away, then close the door and walk back to the bookshelf. The camera sat exactly where Hendrix had positioned it, button-sized, perfectly angled, recording everything. Third piece of evidence. I wondered when Wayne intended to stop escalating. The answer came to me as I downloaded the footage to my laptop. He wouldn't stop until something forced him to. And somewhere in Austin, that forcing moment was already beginning. Wednesday, I'd caught Wayne's fake psychiatrist on camera. Thursday morning, my phone rang at 7:53, and I didn't know yet that my youngest son was about to walk into my eldest son's trap. Hendrix called from the TechFlow parking lot, voice bright, with the kind of hope I hadn't heard since before Thanksgiving. Dad, senior chip verification architect. Domain office. Signing bonus could cover a mortgage down payment. This is it. You don't need luck, I told him. You've got talent. What I didn't tell him was that I'd spent Wednesday evening reviewing the footage of Marcus Fielding's confession, cataloging it as evidence piece number 3, and wondering when Wayne would strike next. I should have warned Hendrix. Should have said your brother is escalating, be careful. But I didn't want to poison his optimism with my suspicion. That was a mistake. Hendrix told me about the interview, later sitting at my kitchen table Friday night, with his laptop open showing me the email headers and IP traces that proved what had happened. But I'll tell it the way he experienced it, the way he described it to me, with that particular exhaustion that comes from having hope crushed methodically. The first 2 hours were perfect. TechFlow Innovations glass interview room on the 4th floor of a domain district building, where Austin tech companies cluster like circuits on a board. The panel consisted of 3 senior engineers and Sarah Caldwell, lead technical interviewer, 15-year veteran of semiconductor talent acquisition, who'd seen brilliant candidates, but rarely one like Hendrix. They'd given him a live coding challenge, flagship architecture problem they'd been working on for months, allowed time 45 minutes, industry standard. Hendrix solved it in 18. This is exactly the thinking we need on the flagship project, Sarah had said, photographing his whiteboard diagram. The way you approach the power distribution bottleneck, I haven't seen that solution anywhere in the literature. Hendrix had felt it then, the moment when you know the job is yours, when the questions shift from assessment to logistics. When the interviewers start talking about team fit instead of technical capability. Then Vernon Rumrow walked into the room. Hendrix recognized him from the company directory he'd researched. HR director. 38, according to LinkedIn. Sigma Chi fraternity, University of Texas. The same fraternity Wayne had belonged to. Vernon whispered something to Sarah Caldwell, placed a single sheet of paper on the table in front of her. Wouldn't make eye contact with Hendrix. Just whispered and left. Sarah's expression changed. Professional warmth to professional distance in the span of 3 seconds. We've received some concerning information, she said, reading from the paper, about professional conduct at your previous positions. Can you address these allegations? What allegations? Hendrix asked. I've never had a single complaint in 5 years. According to this report, there are questions about your reliability and professional judgment. From who? What specific incidents? Sarah looked uncomfortable. The source is confidential, but we take these concerns seriously. The interview ended 12 minutes later. Professional handshakes. Promises to be in touch. The kind of polite dismissal that means the decision is already made. Hendrix drove home from that interview without turning on the radio hands at 10, and 2, processing the shift from exactly what we need to concerning allegations in the space of 3 whispered words. Friday at 3:17 p.m., the rejection email arrived at his East Austin apartment. After careful consideration, we've decided to move forward with a candidate who represents a better cultural fit for our team. Another man might have gotten angry, might have called TechFlow demanding explanations, might have posted on LinkedIn about unfair hiring practices. Hendrix opened his terminal, because Hendrix is his mother's son, and Eleanor taught him that emotion without evidence is just noise. And he's my son, which means when someone sabotages a system, he debugs it until he finds the fault. He pulled the email headers first, full technical metadata that most people never see hidden in the message source code. Found the draft file creation timestamp. Traced the IP address where the original document was generated, 98.24, 87.34. Not a corporate IP, residential subnet. Debugging a sabotaged interview is like debugging code. You pull the logs, trace the errors, follow the breadcrumbs until you find the exact line where someone deliberately broke the system. He ran the IP through geolocation services. 3 different databases cross-referenced for accuracy. All returned the same result: Westlake Hills, Austin, Texas. Residential address. He pulled up his family contact list. Cross-referenced addresses. Only one family member lived in Westlake Hills. Only one person had TechFlow connections. Only one person had called Vernon Romero on Monday morning and made him do something he clearly didn't want to do. Wayne! Hendrix sat at his desk, 3 monitors, terminal windows open across all of them. The kind of setup that looks chaotic to non-engineers, but represents pure, methodical thinking, and looked at the evidence he'd compiled in 90 minutes. Email metadata, IP geolocation, family address cross-reference, Vernon Romero's uncomfortable body language during the sabotage, Wayne's Monday morning call that someone in a break room had overheard. Proof. He picked up his phone, typed my number with steady fingers. I answered on the second ring. Hendrix. Dad, it's me. I need to talk to you, and I need you to listen to everything before you say anything. I heard something in his voice I'd never heard before. Not anger, not even hurt, just the cold certainty of an engineer who's traced a fault to its source and knows exactly what needs to be fixed. I'm listening, I said. Wayne sabotaged my TechFlow interview, Hendrix said. I have proof, digital evidence, IP addresses, timestamps, geolocation data, and I need to know what we do with it. I looked at my own laptop still open on the kitchen table, the video file from Wednesday's fake psychiatrist confession, the email from the bank about the frozen accounts, the guarantee contract with its 7 fail-safe clauses. Evidence piece number 4. Come to the ranch, I said. Bring everything you have. It's time we stopped collecting evidence in isolation and started building a case. Hendrix arrived at the ranch Friday night at 9 p.m. sharp, laptop bag over his shoulder, carrying the weight of evidence and the exhaustion of someone who'd spent 36 hours debugging a sabotage operation. I'd made coffee. Set 2 mugs on the kitchen table under the yellow overhead light Eleanor had picked out in 2003, the one that made everything look warmer than it was. Hendrix sat down, opened his laptop, and turned the screen toward me, IP address 98.24.187.34, he said. Residential subnet. Geolocation services return Westlake Hills, Austin, Texas. The rejection email was originally drafted from Wayne's home computer before being forwarded through TechFlow's system. I looked at the terminal windows the network traces the metadata. Timestamps. My youngest son had done exactly what I'd taught him: follow the data. Trust the logs, let the evidence speak. I knew since last week, I said. Hendrix blinked. You knew what? I stood up, walked to the kitchen drawer where Eleanor used to keep her recipe cards and tax receipts, and pulled out the thick manila folder I'd been building for 3 weeks. Spread it across the table beside his laptop. I knew Wayne was escalating, I said. I didn't know the specific mechanism, but I knew he wouldn't stop with the Thanksgiving humiliation or the account freeze, so I started collecting evidence the day after you sold your car. Video file on USB drive. Marcus Fielding's confession timestamped Wednesday, admitting Wayne paid him $3,500 to sign fraudulent psychiatric evaluation. Email chain 47 pages, legally subpoenaed through Opal Dunn correspondence between Wayne and Vernon Romero, dating back to 2019, including the audit report reference that proved blackmail. Guarantee contract annotated yellow highlights on all 7 failsafe clauses I'd written into the document with handwritten notes explaining each trigger mechanism. You've been investigating this whole time, Hendrix asked. Since the moment he called you pathetic, I said. Engineers don't get mad. We collect data. We laid out evidence like assembling a circuit board, each piece connecting to the next current, flowing from his crimes to our documentation to the inevitable short circuit that would end him. Hendrix mapped it on a legal pad. Started with Thanksgiving dinner, the public humiliation, drew arrows to the account freeze I'd triggered via contract clause, added the fake psychiatrist trap, connected it to Vernon Romero's coercion and the TechFlow sabotage. Each crime and escalation, each escalation documented. This is enough, Hendrix said, looking at the timeline. We can take this to a lawyer, file civil claims, maybe even criminal charges. Not yet, I said. We're missing the financial documentation, the offshore accounts, the paper trail that proves intent beyond reasonable doubt. Hendrix's phone buzzed. Text message. He read it, looked up at me. Gwendolyn, he said. She wants to meet. Tomorrow morning, South Congress Cafe. Says she has something I need to see. I nodded. Go. He told me about it Saturday afternoon when he came back to the ranch. USB drives in his pocket, expression somewhere between respect and shock. Gwendolyn had arrived first. Ordered tea. Sat at a corner table away from the windows where Wayne's friends might see her. When Hendrix walked in, she didn't waste time on pleasantries or explanations. She placed 2 black USB drives on the table between them. Black one is 3 years of Wayne's company accounting records, she'd said. Pages 34 through 67 are what the IRS will want to see. Systematic underreporting, offshore transfers, the kind of fraud that carries federal penalties. Hendrix had picked up the first drive. You have legal access to these? I'm a co-signer on the business accounts. I have signing authority on the tax returns. Everything on that drive is documentation I legally possess. She'd pushed the second drive across the table. Red one is the Cayman account screenshots, Tindra Perry's Instagram timeline and hotel bills that match his claimed business trips. The affair started in March 2023, same month he created the offshore LLC. I watched my daughter-in-law choose justice over marriage across a cafe table and understood that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you were wrong, to stay silent. What Wayne did to your father, Gwendolyn had said, and what he tried to do to you that crosses every line I have left. I signed those financial reports. I vouched for his integrity to banks and investors. I enabled this because I didn't want to see it. You're destroying your marriage, Hendrix had said. My marriage was destroyed the moment he opened that Cayman account. I just didn't want to admit it. Hendrix had held the 2 drives, feeling their weight. Physical objects containing digital evidence that would transform a family dispute into a federal investigation. You understand this will destroy him? He'd asked. Not just the marriage, but everything. His business, his reputation, possibly his freedom. Gwendolyn had taken a sip of her tea, steady as stone. That's why I came. It's later than it should have been, but I came. She'd stood to leave, paused at the table. Tell your father I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, she'd said, and tell him I'm on the right side now. Hendrix came back to the ranch Saturday afternoon and spread the USB drives beside the manila folder and his laptop on my kitchen table. We'd gone from scattered evidence to a complete case in 48 hours. Fake doctor confession, attempted fraud, witness intimidation. IP forensics career, sabotage, conspiracy, tortious interference. Tax records, federal evasion, offshore money laundering. Cayman account and affair documentation, asset concealment, marital fraud. Guarantee contract violations, breach of fiduciary duty, unjust enrichment. Monday morning. I said, we take this to Opal Dunn. Let her tell us what we have in legal terms. Hendrix nodded, looked at the evidence spread across Eleanor's kitchen table, the table where we'd done homework and taxes and patent applications and funeral planning. Now it held the systematic destruction of my eldest son's carefully constructed lies. Mom would be proud of you, Hendrix said. She'd be proud of both of us, I said, and devastated by one of us. I thought about Gwendolyn's words, it's later than it should have been, but she came. Sometimes that's all you can ask. That people eventually choose the right side, even when it costs them everything. Monday morning, I drove to Congress Avenue with Hendrix in the passenger seat. Manila folder on his lap, USB drives in my shirt pocket. We didn't talk much, just listened to the December rain tap against the windshield and watched Austin traffic crawl past the Capitol building. Opal Dunn's office occupied the 18th floor of a glass tower, where attorneys and financial consultants cluster like circuits on a board, all looking down at the Colorado River and calculating other people's futures. The mahogany conference table reflected the December sunrise over the Colorado River like a mirror, and I placed the manila folder exactly in the center. Opal Dunn stood to greet us. 52, according to the Texas Bar Association profile Hendrix had pulled up Saturday night. 22 years of family law experience, specializing in high-asset divorces and fiduciary disputes. Gwendolyn's law school friend had called her the person you want when the stakes are existential, and the other side thinks they've already won. Mr. Norris, Hendrix. She shook our hands. Professional grip, direct eye contact. Gwendolyn said you have documentation that needs legal interpretation. Let's see what we're working with. I spread the evidence across her conference table like laying out circuit diagrams. Fake doctor confession on USB drive. IP forensics report showing Wayne's residential subnet as the source of Hendrix's sabotaged rejection email. Tax fraud ledger pages 34 through 67 flagged with yellow sticky notes where Gwendolyn had marked the systematic underreporting. Cayman account printouts. Instagram screenshots of Tindra Perry's $12,000 Hermes bag timestamped October 14th. Opal sat down, picked up the first document, the fake doctor video summary with timestamps. Read it, set it down, picked up the IP forensics report, studied the network traces, set it down, opened the tax ledger to page 34. Then she read in silence for 4 minutes while Hendrix and I watched. 4 minutes, 240 seconds. Long enough to watch the traffic light at Congress and Cesar Chavez cycle through green, yellow, red 12 times. Long enough to notice Hendrix wasn't blinking. Long enough to feel every decision from November replay in my head. The Thanksgiving humiliation, the account, freeze trigger, the fake psychiatrist trap, the moment Gwendolyn chose sides. Opal's pen clicked against her legal pad, made a note, clicked again. The sound filled the silence like a metronome counting down to judgment. Finally she looked up. In 22 years of practice, she said, I've never seen defendants document their crimes this thoroughly. The fake psychiatrist is on video confessing to bribery. The sabotage has IP-level proof of origin. The tax fraud is annotated by a cosigner with legal access. Your son didn't just commit these acts, he created an evidence trail a first-year law student could follow. TI engineer, I said. We're trained to document everything. Wayne inherited that habit. He just forgot that documentation cuts both ways. Your sister-in-law brought you these tax records? Opal asked, tapping the ledger. Saturday morning, I said. 2 USB drives. She said she couldn't watch anymore. That changes the privilege calculus. She's a co-signer on the business accounts, so she has legal access. But we'll need her deposition. Is she willing to testify? She told Hendrix to tell me she's on the right side now, I said. Opal nodded, opened her laptop, started typing. The screen reflected in the window behind her spreadsheet cells filling with text. 4 causes of action, she said, creating columns. Fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, conversion, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Each piece of evidence maps to at least 2 of these. Some map to all 4. She worked methodically. Fake doctor video fraud, intentional infliction. IP forensics, tortious interference, intentional infliction. Tax ledger fraud breach of fiduciary duty. Cayman account conversion breach of fiduciary duty. Strategy. Opal continued, is civil lawsuit first. Lower burden of proof than criminal preponderance of evidence, instead of beyond reasonable doubt. We establish the pattern in civil court, then refer the tax fraud to Travis County DA and the IRS. Criminal charges follow civil judgment. What will Wayne's defense be? Hendrix asked. That the guarantee was your father's idea. That the Cayman account is marital property he's legally entitled to access. That business decisions were made in good faith, and the interview sabotage is circumstantial. Opal leaned back in her chair. He'll fight every inch, especially when he sees the fake doctor video. Then we don't lead with it, I said. We hold it back. Exactly, Opal said. We let him lie first. Then we prove the lie. The video becomes rebuttal evidence, not opening evidence. Maximum impact. She looked at me across the table. Conference room quiet, except for the hum of climate control and distant traffic 18 floors below. What do you want from this, Mr. Norris? What's your goal? Hendrix answered before I could. Everything. Take the house, the cars, the business. Make him pay for what he did. I looked at my younger son, saw Eleanor in his jaw, saw my own anger in his clenched fists. Then I looked past him out the window at the Colorado River, 18 floors below. Quakers navigating the current, not fighting the water, using it, understanding it. I want him to understand what he did, I said. Not just be afraid of consequences, not just lose money or property. I want Wayne to understand the harm he caused, the betrayal, the cruelty. I want comprehension, not just punishment. Hendrix wanted Wayne destroyed. Gwendolyn wanted Wayne stopped. What did I want? I thought about the word understanding, not as a feeling, but as an engineering outcome. You don't fix a broken system by punishing it. You fix it by making it run correctly. That's what I needed from Wayne. Opal was quiet for a moment. Then she closed her laptop. That's not a legal outcome, she said. Courts don't mandate understanding. They mandate damages, injunctions, restitution. But I know a way to get close. How? I asked. We build the case so thoroughly that he can't hide from what he did. Every deposition, every document request, every interrogatory, we make him confront each crime in detail. We make him see himself clearly. And then she paused. We offer him a choice. Settle with full accountability, or go to trial where everything becomes public record. She stood up, walked to the window, looked down at the Colorado River. We file Wednesday, she said. That gives us 2 days to prepare the complaint and demand letter. Certified delivery. He'll have it by Friday. 2 days, I said. 2 days until my eldest son learned that the father he'd called pathetic had been building a case with engineering precision while he'd been escalating with arrogance. I didn't learn about the blackmail until early January when Opal called me with an update that made my blood run cold. But the actual event happened on Tuesday, the December 16th, 2025, exactly 1 day after we'd walked out of her office with our litigation strategy locked and loaded. Wayne was alone in his McMansion when the FedEx envelope arrived at 2:47 p.m. I know the exact time because Opal's forensic accountant later subpoenaed the delivery logs. Inside that envelope was a handwritten note on cream-colored stationery, the kind you'd buy at an upscale boutique in West Austin. The handwriting was elegant, almost artistic. The message was anything but. 3 years of evidence. 3 years of you telling me everything. Bank statements, passwords, complaints about your pathetic father and ungrateful brother. I documented it all. Wayne, every dinner conversation, every pillow talk confession, every time you bragged about what you'd done, $200,000 in cash by December 30th, or I send everything to your family's attorney. You know I'm not bluffing. You taught me how to plan ahead. T. The note included a single photograph, Wayne and a woman I'd never seen taken at some high-end restaurant, his hand on her knee under the table, both of them laughing like they owned the world. On the back of the photo, written in that same elegant script, La Condesa, October 14th, 2023. Remember this night? I do. I remember everything. Wayne's first reaction, Opal told me later, was rage. He called the phone number Tindra had been using for 3 years. Disconnected. He drove to her apartment in South Congress, the one he'd been paying for since 2022. Empty. Completely cleared out. Not a stick of furniture, not a piece of mail, nothing. The landlord said a woman matching her description had paid through December and left no forwarding address. Tindra Perry, that was her real name, we discovered later, was 29 years old, a former gallery assistant who'd met Wayne at an art opening in late 2022, just months after he'd pushed me out of the company. She had auburn hair, green eyes, and, according to Wayne's credit card statements, a taste for expensive things he was more than happy to provide. What Wayne didn't know was that Tindra had a background in investigative journalism before she'd moved to Austin. She knew how to ask questions, how to listen, how to document everything, and Wayne in his arrogance had told her everything. Every detail of how he'd frozen my accounts, fabricated the dementia story, stolen my voting rights. He'd bragged about it, Opal said, like it was some kind of clever business strategy. Like Tindra would admire his ruthlessness. Instead, she'd been recording, photographing, building a file that would make our litigation look like a parking ticket by comparison. Here's what I realized sitting in Opal's office in early January when she showed me the timeline. Wayne's entire personality was constructed around control and superiority. He needed someone to witness his victories, to validate his cleverness. His wife, Gwendolyn, was too smart. She'd started questioning him the moment his behavior shifted. Hendrix and I were his victims, not his audience, but Tindra. She'd played the role perfectly, the admiring girlfriend, the woman impressed by his business acumen, the safe space where he could finally tell the truth about what he'd done and be celebrated for it. His fatal flaw wasn't greed. It wasn't even cruelty. It was the desperate human need to be seen and understood, twisted into a weapon by someone who recognized it and used it against him. Begin mid-roll CT. Before I tell you what Wayne calculated when he opened his bank statements that night, I need to hear from you. Comment A, if you think he should have paid the blackmail, or B, if he should have called her bluff, and tell me why, in 5 to 10 words. Your perspective helps me understand what resonates in these family stories. Please note, the next part includes some fictionalized details, added to deepen the emotional impact and convey the core message. And mid-roll CTA, by December 16th, Wayne's accessible liquid assets totaled $47,300. The rest was frozen by the Section 7 reversal I'd triggered, tied up in legal holds, or sitting in that Cayman account Gwendolyn had already flagged for investigation. He had 13 days to come up with $200,000. He didn't have to pay off a woman who'd vanished into thin air to protect himself from exposure that was already inevitable, because we'd filed our case the day before. The mathematics of his situation must have been suffocating. Pay Tindra and go bankrupt, unable to afford legal defense. Don't pay her and give us even more ammunition. Borrow the money and reveal his desperation to colleagues who already sensed blood in the water. There was no good option, no clever manipulation, no way to talk his way out. When Opal called me on January 3rd, she said something I'll never forget. Alfred, your son's entire system is self-destructing. We didn't even have to push. We just had to wait for the architecture to collapse under its own weight. People who build empires on lies always engineer their own demolition. They just can't see it until the countdown reaches 0. I sat in my office at the ranch, the same office where I'd built Norris Technologies from nothing 40 years ago, and I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not vindication, just a deep, aching sadness for the son I'd raised, the boy who'd helped me wire the first prototype in our garage, who'd once believed that building something real was enough. Somewhere along the way, Wayne had stopped believing that truth and competence could win. He'd decided that only manipulation and performance mattered. And now he was learning the hardest lesson of all: you can't manipulate mathematics, and you can't perform your way out of documentary evidence. Tindra Perry had given Wayne exactly what he'd given me, a system designed to destroy him, activated at the moment of maximum vulnerability, built from his own words and choices. The symmetry was almost poetic, and the cruelest part. Unlike my failsafes, which were designed to restore justice, hers were designed purely for profit. Wayne had finally met someone more ruthless than himself, and he'd spent 3 years teaching her everything she needed to know to break him. My phone vibrated twice during Opal's explanation of discovery timelines, email notifications I almost ignored until I saw the sender, First International Trust, Grand Cayman. It was Wednesday afternoon, December 17th, exactly 2 days after we'd filed the lawsuit. Opal's office on the 18th floor had floor-to-ceiling windows framing downtown Austin, I'd been half listening to deposition schedules while watching winter light fade over the Capitol dome. Then my phone lit up and everything changed. Alfred Opel paused mid-sentence. You just went pale. I read the email once, twice. My hands were shaking. The international audit. It's finished. 4 days ahead of schedule. They never finish early, Opel said, leaning forward. What's the damage? I turned the phone so she could see. Account balance confirmed $20,427,318.42, including accrued interest from the November freeze. Wire transfer capability restored immediately. Opal took the phone, read the entire email, then set it down with careful precision. Wayne froze this account thinking he'd trapped you. He just preserved $20 million he can't touch. The irony hit me like a physical force. Wayne's paranoia had created a fortress around the one asset he most wanted to steal. If he'd left it alone, he could have continued siphoning funds through shell corporations. Instead, the freeze locked him out. Frozen meant preserved. The fault was Wayne's. You just became the most dangerous kind of plaintiff, Opal said, recalculating on her legal pad. One who can afford the truth. How long can Wayne afford his attorney? I asked. She did quick math, burn rate, runway, collapse point. His liquid assets are under 50,000. Defense litigation at this complexity runs 40 to 60,000 monthly. 6 months at most. You can afford 6 years. 6 years. I'd built Norris Technologies in less time, starting with a garage workshop and a signal processing patent nobody believed in. Wayne had inherited 40 years of work and burned through it in 3. Now he'd learned what it felt like to watch the clock run out, while someone with deeper pockets simply waited. 30 years at Texas Instruments, I debugged 1,000 systems, isolate the fault trace the signal, fix the break. Wayne had frozen the account to isolate me, but frozen meant preserved. The signal was clear. The break was his. My phone vibrated again. Another email, Lockheed Martin Skunk. Works Advanced Propulsion Research Division. I opened it, standing too restless to sit. 4.5 million, I read aloud. For a prototype I built in 2017 that Wayne said was worthless. For the fuel atomizer he told investors was obsolete technology with no commercial viability. Preliminary valuation, final negotiation scheduled December 23rd. Opal did the math instantly. 24.9 million total. You just won this case before discovery even started. No, I said. I just got the ammunition. Winning means Wayne understands what he threw away. She studied me the way Eleanor used to when I was working through a design problem. You're not doing this for the money. I'm doing it so my younger son doesn't have to sell his car to save a patent his brother tried to kill. And so the next person at Norris Technologies who invents something worth keeping doesn't have to wonder if honesty is a liability. I pulled up Hendrix's number, switched to video call. He answered on the second ring, his face filling the screen. He was in the ranch office. Eleanor's old desk, visible behind him, winter light catching the auburn tones in his hair she'd passed down. 26 years old, exhausted from holding together a family business, while his father and brother destroyed each other. Dad, everything okay? I need to show you something. I forwarded both emails, watched his face as he read them, saw the exact moment the numbers registered. Dad, I'm sorry about the car, he said immediately, guilt breaking through. I thought we needed... You'll have a better car. Next week if you want. A Mustang GT500, if that's what you're missing. Or something sensible. Your choice. He laughed, surprised, then his expression shifted. We should tell Wayne. Show him he lost. That he was wrong about everything. I looked at Hendrix on Opal's laptop screen, my younger son trying to apologize for selling a car to save his father. And for the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt the weight lift. Not victory, just the certainty that my son would never have to sacrifice anything again. Wayne still thinks I'm broke, I said slowly, working through the strategy. He thinks the Cayman account is frozen permanently. He thinks Nova 1 is worthless. I need him to keep thinking that exactly 60 more days. Well, I thought Opal asked, though her expression said she already knew. Because Wayne spent 3 years lying to me about my own mental competence. 3 years making me doubt myself while he stripped everything I built. Now he's going into depositions, discovery trial, preparation, all while believing I'm desperate and weak. Let him prepare his entire defense around that assumption. Let him tell his attorney I can't afford a fight. Let him calculate his strategy based on false information. I turned the laptop so both Opal and Hendrix could see my phone screen. The bank statement still open, $20, 427, 3/18/42. Wayne froze this in November, thinking it would break me. For 60 days, I'm going to let him keep thinking it worked. I closed the laptop, met Opal's eyes. Then in February, I'll hand him the bank statement in court and watch him realize he's been destroying himself for nothing. Maintaining the illusion required discipline. Thursday morning, I drove to Opal's office wearing the same flannel jacket I'd worn to Thanksgiving dinner, the one Wayne had smirked at, the one that signaled broke and desperate. The bank statement showing 20 million sat encrypted on my phone. Nobody needed to see it yet. Opal spread 3 legal pads across the conference table: yellow for civil claims, blue for digital evidence, white for timeline, and I recognized the project management structure before she explained it. Civil litigation is project management with rules of evidence, she said, tapping each pad in sequence. We need 3 deliverables by Monday. I'll handle the 3 primary causes of action: breach of contract, tortious, interference, defamation. Hendrix, you compile all digital evidence in admissible format. Alfred, you build the comprehensive timeline. Hendrix nodded, already making notes on his laptop. 26 years old, and he worked like I'd taught him: break the problem into components. Assign ownership, document everything. I can format all digital files, he said. Metadata stripped, where required chain of custody, documented one-party consent recordings, flagged per Texas law. I'll build the timeline, I said. Every interaction, every promise, every dollar. Opal studied me for a moment. How far back? November 2022, the day Wayne first promised me equity in the restructured company. Through last week. The 3 years of interactions. She looked skeptical. That's a lot of detail to reconstruct from memory. I didn't correct her assumption. Not yet. We separated to our respective workstations like a distributed engineering team. Opal stayed in her office, legal references stacked on her desk, drafting the complaint that would make Wayne's actions look exactly like what they were: calculated theft dressed up as corporate restructuring. Hendrix went back to his apartment with 2 laptops and the USB drives Gwendolyn had delivered. I drove to Hill Country Ranch with a stack of blank legal pads and the box I'd been keeping in my office safe. At Texas Instruments, I'd managed projects with 100-person teams, million-dollar budgets, 6-month deadlines. This was a 3-person team, a budget I couldn't reveal yet, and a 60-day deadline. Same principles: divide, work, document, everything, trust the process. By Thursday afternoon, we were operating in parallel silence, broken only by text messages. Hendrix at 4:47 p.m. 43 video files reformatted. This is like debugging code, tedious, but critical. I texted back, page 12 of timeline, November 2022. Wayne promised equal partnership in writing. I saved the email. Opal's email arrived at 6:23 p.m. Tortious interference, brief, complete. Need Alfred's timeline by Friday noon to cross-reference dates. I worked through dinner, through the winter darkness that fell over the ranch at 5:30, through the silence that Eleanor used to fill with NPR broadcasts, and occasional questions about whatever I was building. The office still smelled faintly of her lavender hand cream. 3 years gone, and I could still feel her presence in the careful organization of the file cabinets, the labeled boxes of component parts, the systematic approach to chaos she'd taught me. The timeline grew in my engineer's block. Letters, each date, each phone call, each dollar amount, each promise Wayne made and broke. Not from memory. From the contemporaneous notes I'd been keeping since the first time Wayne's tone shifted from collaboration to condescension. Friday morning at 10 o'clock, I walked into Opal's office and set 47 handwritten pages on her desk. She picked up the first page, started reading, then the second, then flipped to the middle. November 14, 2022. Wayne promised 40% equity by phone. December 3rd, reduced to 25% via email. January 17, 2023, verbally suggested 15% pending performance review. She looked up at me. You remember dates this clearly, specific percentages from phone calls years ago? Engineers don't trust memory, I said. I wrote it from day one. The room went very quiet. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows downtown, Austin traffic hummed 18 floors below. Opal set down the timeline pages with the same careful precision she'd used with the bank statement. You've been documenting this for 3 years. Her voice was level, attorney neutral, but I heard the question underneath. You knew he'd betray you. I knew he might, I said. So I prepared for when he did? She picked up page 15, scanned it, cross-referenced something in her own notes. This level of detail you weren't investigating recently. You've been building a case file since November 2022. I've been building a record, I corrected. A case requires intent to litigate. I just wanted the truth documented if I ever needed it. Hendrix arrived at 7:30 Friday evening with the formatted digital evidence, 2 encrypted drives, chain of custody documentation, metadata, reports that would satisfy any judge's evidentiary standards. Opal had the complaint, drafted the civil causes of action documented with legal precedent, the demand calculations justified down to the dollar. We stood around the conference table like engineers reviewing a final prototype before production. 3 deliverables assembled in parallel, ready for integration. Final item, Opal said, pulling out the demand letter. Do you want to review this? We're citing the guarantee clause as primary breach of contract. I put on my flannel jacket, the same one I'd worn all week to maintain the illusion. No need. I read it carefully 3 years ago before I wrote that clause myself. Hendrix looked up from his laptop. Wait, you wrote it? Wayne wanted the guarantee documented. He said verbal promises weren't sufficient for investor confidence. So I drafted the language. I tapped the demand letter where Opal had highlighted the relevant section. Irrevocable minimum payment guarantee of $500,000, annually enforceable regardless of employment status, corporate restructuring or change in ownership. Wayne signed it without reading. His attorney at the time should have caught it. They didn't. Hendrix stared at me across the conference table, and I saw the question forming behind his eyes. Was this preparation or paranoia? The answer was both. You prepare for betrayal, because you've been betrayed before. Eleanor taught me that when her first husband emptied their joint account in 1987, Wayne just reminded me. Opal picked up the 47-page timeline, cross-referenced it with the guarantee clause I'd drafted in 2022, and started laughing, not joy, but professional admiration. You've been building this case for 3 years. Wayne never had a chance. I looked out at the dark Colorado River, winding through downtown Austin. He had every chance, I said quietly. He just made the wrong choice at every turn. Saturday afternoon, Hendrix told me what he'd done that morning. I was in the ranch workshop calibrating an old oscilloscope when he walked in and said, I recruited Vernon Romero. He's going to testify. He'd sent the text Friday at 11:47 p.m. I know you didn't do it voluntarily. Meet me Saturday, 8 a.m. I'm not recording. And arrived at the Miller Cafe 20 minutes early to watch Vernon decide whether to show. Vernon walked in at 8:03 a.m. carrying a small suitcase, pale and red-eyed like he hadn't slept in days. He sat down across from Hendrix without ordering coffee. For 2 full minutes, Hendrix said neither of them spoke. No laptop on the table. No phone recording. Just silence and the sound of the espresso machine hissing in the background. Finally, Vernon broke. How long have you known about the blackmail? Hendrix asked. Since my dad's interview got sabotaged. About you being forced since I saw your face in the video. Vernon's hands were shaking when he set them flat on the table. I signed things I didn't read. He kept the originals. Tax documents, audit certifications, board resolutions. He said if I questioned anything, he'd report me for a 2018 compliance violation I'd missed. I have a wife, 2 kids in middle school. I couldn't afford to lose my license. Hendrix showed him the 2019 audit report, Appendix D, the one Gwendolyn had pulled from Wayne's home office. Vernon's signature was on page 67, certifying financial statements that underreported company assets by 18%. You're his second victim, Hendrix told him, but if you don't protect yourself before this explodes, you'll be prosecuted with him. Vernon stared at his own signature like it belonged to someone else. What do I have to do? Call my lawyer Monday morning. Opal Dunn. Tell her everything Wayne forced you to sign. She'll protect you as a coerced witness. Hendrix slid his phone across the table. Give me your number. I'll text you her contact. Vernon typed his number with hands still shaking. What do I have to testify to? Just the truth, Hendrix said. That's all we need. I realized my younger son had learned something I'd spent 40 years missing. People aren't villains, they're just scared. Eleanor believed it enough to volunteer every Sunday afternoon at the hospice for the last 4 years of her life. Hendrix had been listening. Monday morning, December 23rd, I was having breakfast at the ranch when Opal called. Demand letter was delivered at 9:15 a.m. Certified FedEx. Blue envelope. Wayne signed for it personally. I could picture him in his Westlake Hills office, the one with the view of the hill country he'd bought with money he'd diverted from R&D budgets, opening that envelope with no idea what was coming. 47 pages. 4 causes of action. Fraud. breach of fiduciary duty, conversion, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Total damages $780,000. 60-day deadline before full public filing and IRS referral. Opal had written it in the methodical style of someone who knows precision wins cases. Every claim backed by exhibit references. Every dollar amount traced to source documents. Every timeline entry cross-referenced to my handwritten notes. Wayne would read it and understand, probably for the first time, that his father hadn't been deteriorating, he'd been documenting. I imagined Wayne's hands shaking the way Vernon's had, reading aloud to himself, Plaintiff Alfred Norris demands cessation of all fraudulent representations, return of all misappropriated funds, and acknowledgement of guarantee clause, obligations as stipulated in November 2022 agreement. Flipping to the last page, seeing the deadline, December 23rd through February 23rd, 60 days. Then recognizing the clause language, the ironclad guarantee he'd signed without reading, the one I'd written myself. My phone rang at 9:47 a.m., caller ID Wayne. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, watched the name flash on the screen like a warning light on a circuit board. How many times had Wayne called me over 30 years? Thousands. Birthday calls, advice calls, loan calls, emergency calls, but never a call like this. Never Wayne needing his father more than Alfred needed his son. The power had finally irrevocably reversed. I answered on the 4th ring. Hi, son. Dad's having breakfast. What's up? His voice was shaking. I got a letter? Letter. I kept my tone light paternal like he'd called about weather. From who? A lawyer. Opal Dunn. Congress Avenue. He was breathing hard. She's saying, Dad, did you hire her? I set down my coffee cup, listened to the silence stretch. Finally, Wayne. I think you should talk to your own attorney about that. I wouldn't want to interfere with legal advice. Dad, this is serious. She's claiming fraud, breach of contract, $780,000. She has documentation going back 3 years. She has... His voice cracked. She has the guarantee clause, the one you signed. The one I wrote. I corrected gently. You asked me to draft it. Remember, you wanted investor confidence. The silence on his end was absolute. I could hear him breathing, could almost hear the gears turning as he tried to reconstruct what he thought he knew. Dad, we need to talk about this, face to face, not through lawyers. We're family. I held the phone against my ear and watched a hawk circle above the ranch hunting. Wayne was still talking something about misunderstanding, about working this out, about how lawyers only make things worse. I let him talk. 60 seconds. 90. Let him hear his own desperation echo back through the silence. Then quiet and final. Wayne, I need to go. Hendrix is coming for breakfast. Take care of yourself, son. I ended the call before he could respond. Set the phone face down on the table. Outside the window, the hawk had found something. It folded its wings and dropped. The hawk caught something that morning. I watched it carry the catch back to its nest in the live oak, efficient and final. 3 weeks passed before Hendrix made his move. Monday, January 13th, 7:03 a.m. Hendrix told me later he sat at his apartment desk for 20 minutes with his finger hovering over the publish button. The post was complete, 1847 words, 3 PDF attachments showing IP forensics methodology, 4 audio files labeled with Texas Penal Code citations, and a title that couldn't be ignored, a case study in professional sabotage. He'd written it over 6 days, clinical and precise like a technical paper. No names. Subject A and Subject B. But the details were specific enough that anyone in Austin's semiconductor community would recognize the pattern: November 2025 interview sabotage IP address, traced to Westlake Hills one-party consent recordings, documented under Texas Penal Code 1602 B4. That statute was critical. Texas is a one-party consent state. If you're part of the conversation, you can record it without telling the other person. Hendrix had been part of every conversation Wayne manipulated, every promise. Wayne broke every phone call where Wayne's tone shifted from mentorship to sabotage. The recordings were legal and devastating. The final line of his post read, "This isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when reference-checking culture has no accountability." He clicked publish at 7:03 a.m. and immediately texted me, "It's live. No taking it back now." I was having coffee on the ranch porch when the text arrived. I didn't respond immediately. Hendrix had asked my permission 3 days earlier, and I'd told him what Eleanor used to say about truth. It doesn't need volume, just light. If he believed the post served truth rather than revenge, then he should trust his judgment. By 9 a.m., the post had 340 shares. By 10:15 a.m., a semiconductor engineering newsletter with 47,000 subscribers had featured it in their morning brief with the headline, Anonymous Case Study Exposes Reference Checking Abuse. By 11 a.m., it was on the front page of Hacker News. Hendrix sent me screenshots throughout the morning. Comments were flooding in from engineers across the country, people who recognized the IP forensics methodology, who understood the metadata chain of custody, who'd experienced similar sabotage themselves. The top voted Hacker News comment read, "The one-party consent recordings are legally bulletproof in Texas. This is a masterclass in documentation." A newsletter editor sent Hendrix a direct message. "Can we feature this in today's afternoon brief? Our 47K subscribers need to see it." LinkedIn kept sending notifications. 3,400 people shared your post. 127 people messaged you. In 30 years at Texas Instruments, I'd watched information propagate through networks. Signals amplified noise, filtered truth, verified at each node. Hendrix's post was doing exactly that across LinkedIn. Reddit Hacker News, 3 to 400 human nodes, verifying, amplifying, filtering. The network was debugging Wayne's lies in real time. By noon, the national semiconductor community was responding. A former Intel CTO commented publicly on LinkedIn, "This is why reference checking culture needs reform. The power imbalance is staggering." Reddit threads in R Engineering and R Semiconductors dissected every detail of the case. Slack channels across tech companies from San Jose to Seattle discussed reference checking ethics reform. Wayne's name was still protected by anonymity. Hendrix had been careful about that, but Austin tech insiders were connecting dots. Subject B, Westlake Hills Tech Company. November 2025, interview sabotage. The circle was tightening. I imagined Wayne sitting in his office reading the post, recognizing himself in every paragraph, watching the share count climb, calculating how long before someone said his name out loud. On Reddit, someone posted, "Subject A had IP forensics audio recordings and metadata. They prepared for war." The comment got 2,100 upvotes. At 1:00 p.m., my phone rang. Hendrix's voice different than I'd heard in months. Not angry, not defeated, but something like wonder. "Dad, people are sharing my article in San Jose, Seattle, Portland. Someone from AMD wants a coffee meeting to discuss opportunities." I was standing on the ranch porch again, same spot where I'd watched the hawk hunt 3 weeks ago. My tea had gone cold in the cup. How many shares? 3,400 in 6 hours. That newsletter with 47,000 subscribers featured it. It's on the Hacker News front page. People I've never met are defending me in comments. I heard what he wasn't saying. People believed him. After 6 weeks of Wayne calling him paranoid after the TechFlow rejection, after selling his Mustang to save a patent, his brother had tried to kill strangers across the country, were validating his truth. "What are you going to do with the AMD contact?" I asked. "Have coffee. Listen. They want someone who understands fuel atomization patents." He paused. "Dad, I didn't do this for a job. I did it because I know why you did it." I stood on the hill country ranch porch, holding cold tea, and heard the excitement in Hendrix's voice. Not rage, not revenge, just the pure relief of being believed after 6 weeks of being called paranoid. That was the real victory, not Wayne's destruction, Hendrix's restoration. "This isn't about winning," I said, watching the same live oak where the hawk nested. "This is truth finding its own light. You didn't force it on anyone. You documented what happened, made it public, and let people decide for themselves. That's not revenge. That's transparency." Hendrix was quiet for a moment. "Then Wayne's going to know it's about him." "He already knows. The question is what he'll do about it." We hung up at 1:43 p.m. I went back to my cold tea, back to the workshop where I was cataloging Eleanor's old hospice volunteer files for donation. 4 minutes later, Hendrix texted me a screenshot. "Incoming call at 1:47 p.m. Unknown Austin number," Hendrix had answered. The voice on the other end, Hendrix transcribed it for me later, said, "This is Wayne. We need to talk. That post, people are asking if it's me. Take it down and I'll settle the lawsuit today. Full payment, all of it, just take down the post." Hendrix had looked at the share count on his laptop screen, 4103 and climbing. His response, he told me, was 6 words. "I don't think I will." Hendrix's refusal triggered a cascade I didn't learn about until later, when Opal started forwarding me updates that read like a demolition timeline. Tuesday morning, 8:02 a.m. Vernon Romero was sitting in the TechFlow parking lot when the email arrived. Subject line, personnel action notification. He opened it on his phone and read the first line twice. Effective. Immediately your employment has been terminated for ethics policy violation. Security will escort you to collect personal items within 1 hour. Vernon called Opal's office at 8:47 a.m. She conferenced me in from the ranch, and I listened to him read the termination letter in a voice that had gone completely flat. They're calling it professional misconduct, conflict of interest. They didn't mention Wayne's name, but everyone knows. HR asked if I'd signed documents without proper review. I said yes. Did you mention the blackmail? Opal asked. They didn't ask. They just wanted me gone before lunch. I thought about Vernon, 42 years old, 2 kids and middle school wife who worked part-time at a dental office, now unemployed, because Wayne had spent 6 years using fear as leverage. Vernon, I said, did you bring the original 2019 audit report? Silence. Then it's in my car. I was going to give it to you this week. Don't give it to me, I said. Give it to the attorney Opal referred you to, the one who handles police cooperation agreements. By noon, Tuesday, Wayne's world was collapsing at compound speed. 4 contract termination notices arrived within 3 hours. Lakeway Development Group, Hill Country Builders, 2 others I didn't recognize. Total pipeline value, $3.8 million gone. Opal forwarded me one of the termination letters. Recent allegations regarding professional conduct make continued partnership untenable. Contract terminated per clause 8.3. Zero tolerance for individuals who sabotage competitors' employees. Wayne had built his business like a house of cards contracts, stacked on reputation, reputation stacked on references, references stacked on fear. Hendrix's viral post was a Category 5 wind. The cards were still falling. Tuesday afternoon through Wednesday, Wayne's company Google reviews crashed from 4.1 stars to 1.9 stars. I didn't check them myself. Hendrix sent me screenshots. Review after review, all saying variations of the same thing. If this is the company from the viral LinkedIn post, stay away. Professional sabotage is unforgivable. Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. KVUE, Austin ran a 3-minute segment. The anchor's voice was carefully neutral. A case of alleged workplace sabotage originating in Austin has gone viral, nationwide, raising questions about reference checking ethics. While no names have been officially confirmed, the anonymous LinkedIn post detailing IP forensics and audio evidence has been shared over 6,000 times. Wednesday afternoon at 2:34 p.m., Vernon Romero walked into Austin Police Department headquarters with an attorney Opal had referred a former prosecutor who specialized in cooperation agreements. Vernon submitted a voluntary statement and handed over the original 2019 audit report, the one with his coerced signature on page 67. Opal called me after Vernon's attorney updated her. He told them everything. The blackmail, the 2018 compliance violation Wayne used as leverage every document he signed under duress. They're treating him as a witness, not a suspect. Will it hold? I asked. He was a victim who documented his coercion and came forward before prosecution started. Yes, it'll hold. Vernon Romero had been fired for being Wayne's victim, but in losing his job, he'd gained something more valuable: protection. The state's witness immunity meant Wayne couldn't destroy him anymore. Sometimes the fall is what finally sets you free. Thursday morning, January 16th, 10:17 a.m. Gwendolyn filed for divorce at Travis County Family Court. The petition Opal forwarded it at 11:03 a.m. was 14 pages of methodical documentation. Petitioner requests equitable division predicated on respondent's fraudulent concealment of marital assets and income tax evasion per IRS Form 3949A, submitted January 8, 2026. January 8th. That was 5 days before Hendrix's viral post, 2 days before I'd even known Gwendolyn was compiling evidence. She'd been planning her exit in parallel with our lawsuit, quiet and strategic. The court granted her request for a 90-day asset freeze on all marital accounts, real property and business assets pending forensic accounting review. Wayne received the notification at 11:52 a.m. Thursday. I know the exact time because he tried calling me 3 times between 11:54 and 12:07. I didn't answer. Thursday evening at 8:47 p.m., my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Alfred. Gwendolyn's voice was different than I'd heard at Thanksgiving, quieter, stripped of the performance. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I was in the ranch kitchen, same room where Eleanor used to make her Saturday morning pancakes, where we'd planned Hendrix's college visits, where I'd sat alone after her funeral reception and wondered how silence could be so heavy. It's okay, I said. I want you to know I'm sorry. She was crying, trying to hide it and failing. I knew more than I admitted. I was silent too long. I should have chosen you and Hendrix sooner. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same one Eleanor had refinished in 2019, and felt something in my chest release. Gwendolyn, you don't need to apologize to me. You need to forgive yourself. I enabled him for years, and then you stopped. You gathered evidence. You protected what was left. You chose us when it mattered. That's what counts. She was crying harder now, the kind of crying that sounds like relief, and I realized I was crying too, first time since Eleanor's hospice in 2024. But these weren't grief towers. These were the tears you cry when someone you'd written off as lost finds their way back in the dark. We stayed on the phone for 11 minutes, mostly silence, punctuated by the sound of two people breathing and trying not to break. When we finally hung up, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dark kitchen, listening to crickets through the screen door, phone still warm in my hand. Sometimes families aren't about people born together, I said to the empty room. They're about people choosing each other in the dark. The darkness lifted slowly. 5 weeks passed between Gwendolyn's call and the meeting I'd been waiting for since December 23rd. Wayne Norris walked into Opal Dunn's 18th floor conference room at 8:57 a.m. on Thursday, February the 19th day, 58 of the 60-day deadline, carrying a leather portfolio and what looked from across the table like confidence. I was already seated. Hendrix to my right, Opal to my left, laptop closed in front of me. Wayne took the chair across from us and set down his portfolio with the careful precision of someone trying to control a situation that had been slipping away for 8 weeks. The man who followed him in was David Rodriguez, late 40s, charcoal suit, silver tie, carrying the kind of expensive briefcase defense attorneys use to signal competence. Wayne's lawyer. He nodded to Opal, professional courtesy between opposing counsel, and sat beside Wayne without offering handshakes. Thank you for meeting on short notice, Rodriguez said, extracting a document from his briefcase. My client wants to resolve this matter internally as family. We're here with a formal settlement offer. Wayne looked directly at me for the first time since Thanksgiving. I'm here to end this. $350,000. Full settlement. We both move forward. I didn't respond. Just folded my hands on the table and waited. Rodriguez slid the document to Opal's side of the table. The offer includes a structured payment schedule, mutual non-disparagement clause, and dismissal of all claims with prejudice. Given recent social media attacks on my client's reputation, attacks that have cost him substantial business relationships, this offer represents remarkable restraint and family loyalty. Hendrix shifted in his chair beside me. I touched his wrist once, gentle pressure, wait. My client recognizes the family relationship, Rodriguez continued, and wants internal resolution without prolonged litigation. The viral LinkedIn post has already caused significant professional damage, lost contracts, terminated partnerships, public reputation harm. Despite this, Wayne is prepared to meet his contractual obligations and provide additional consideration as a gesture of goodwill. Wayne's eyes never left my face. He was reading me the way he'd learned to 34 years ago when he was 8, and trying to gauge whether his science fair volcano would impress me. Back then it had. Back then impressing his father mattered more than anything. I had played poker at Texas Instruments, 30 years of Friday lunch games, with engineers who knew probability game theory optimal strategy. The rule Rodriguez didn't understand: never show your hand until the other player's pot committed. Wayne had just gone all in with $350,000. I was holding a royal flush worth $26.6 million. We're prepared to execute today, Rodriguez said. Clean break, mutual non-disparagement, family preserved. Mr. Norris, would you like to respond? I opened my laptop, didn't say anything. Just turned the screen toward Wayne and Rodriguez. Screen 1, First International Trust dashboard. Account number ending in 2847. Balance $20, 73842. Updated this morning at 6:47 a.m. Cayman time. Wayne's face went white. I clicked to screen 2. Email from Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. Timestamp 7:15 a.m. today, Nova 1 patent final valuation $6, $200,000. Purchase agreement ready to execute upon your authorization. Wire transfer capability confirmed. Wayne read it once, twice. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. 20 million, he finally whispered. 400,000. His eyes moved to the second screen. 6.2. Nova 1. This morning. Rodriguez was reading the screens too, his practiced attorney, neutrality, cracking. He looked at Opal, then at me. The meeting's over, isn't it? Opal's voice was perfectly level. Yes. I closed the laptop and pushed a single document across the mahogany table. Not the settlement offer Rodriguez had brought. A different document. 3 pages single-spaced, drafted by Opal, over 6 weeks, while Wayne thought I was desperate and broke. This isn't a settlement offer, I said. My voice was calm, the same tone I'd used to explain circuit diagrams to Wayne when he was 12, when he still believed competence mattered more than manipulation. This is a surrender clause. Wayne stared at the document like it was written in a language he didn't understand. You'll resign from Norris Technologies effective immediately. You'll transfer all voting shares to a trust controlled by Hendrix. You'll pay the guarantee contract in full, not $350,000, the full amount you owe. You'll execute a complete release of any claim to company IP, including Nova 1. And you'll submit a written apology to the board of directors, acknowledging your breach of fiduciary duty. Rodriguez started to speak. I raised one hand, gentle but final. Your client has 2 days before the 60-day deadline expires, and we file publicly. If he files first, every detail goes public: tax fraud, Cayman account, blackmail, fake doctor, IP theft. If he signs this today, it stays between family and the IRS. I looked at Wayne across the mahogany table and remembered Thanksgiving, the word pathetic, delivered to a father with turkey still warm on the plate, the way Wayne wouldn't meet my eyes when I tried to explain about Eleanor's medical bills. For 8 weeks I'd carried that moment. Now I was handing it back, transformed from shame into authority. Dad, I didn't know you had... Wayne's voice was breaking. You froze my account in November thinking it would break me, I said quietly. You called me pathetic at Thanksgiving while Gwendolyn served dessert. You looked away when I tried to explain. You told Hendrix I was too sick to understand business decisions. I pushed the document another inch toward him. I wasn't angry, Wayne. I was tired and sad in a way only a father can understand, watching a son choose power over truth. Manipulation over competence. You made me doubt myself. You made Hendrix sell his car to save a patent you tried to kill. You built an empire on my failure. The conference room was silent except for traffic on Congress Avenue 18 floors below. I spent 60 days letting you believe you'd won, I said. Now you know the truth. Sign it, son. Wayne stared at the surrender document. Rodriguez had a pen in his hand extended toward Wayne, but frozen midair. Hendrix sat beside me, breathing carefully controlled. I sat motionless, waiting. The father, watching the son, realized there were no moves left. The pen touched paper at 9:47 a.m. Wayne's signature, shaky nothing like the confident stroke he'd used to sign company contracts for 3 years, completed the surrender clause. Rodriguez had advised him for 14 minutes. Wayne had signed anyway. There was no other choice. Hendrix and I walked 3 blocks from Opal's office to the notary at 2:03 p.m. Wayne had signed, and now I was going to make sure my son could never lose what we'd won. The notary office was in a converted townhouse on Congress Avenue, 3rd floor windows overlooking the Capitol Dome. Rachel Harper met us in the lobby, mid-50s. Reading glasses on a beaded chain, the kind of precise professional demeanor you get from witnessing 1,000 signatures and filing them correctly every time. Opal had called ahead. Rachel was expecting us. Mr. Norris, she said, shaking my hand. Ms. Dunn explained the transaction, inter vivos gift transfer. You understand these assets transfer immediately upon signature. The transfer is irrevocable once executed. I understand completely, I said. My son protected me when I needed protection. This is his. She led us to a small conference room with a mahogany desk that looked original to the 1920s building. The documents were already laid out: 15-acre Hill Country Ranch property deed, 9 patent assignments, including Nova 1's 60% assignment of all current and future licensing fee streams. Everything transferred immediately, unconditionally, permanently to Hendrix Norris. Hendrix sat beside me, quiet. Dad, you don't have to sign where she indicates, I said. This isn't negotiable. Rachel walked us through each document with the methodical precision of someone who knows one missed initial, can void a transfer. Property deed, sign here, here, and here. Patent assignments, initials on each page, signature on the last. Licensing agreement witnessed, signature dated today, filed immediately. I signed everything in 12 minutes. My hand didn't shake. This was the easiest decision I'd made in 3 years. Your brother, Rachel said to Hendrix, reviewing the final page, signed a surrender clause this morning, waiving all claims to your father's assets. Is that correct? Correct. Opal had sent the confirmation at 10:14 a.m. document timestamped, 9:47 a.m., notarized by a different office across town. Wayne had no standing to contest anything Alfred chose to do with his property. That was the point, I said. Settle the lawsuit first, protect Hendrix second, in that order. Rachel stamped each document with the kind of heavy metal seal that sounds final. As of 2:21 p.m. Thursday, February 19th, 2026, Hendrix Norris owns these assets free and clear. I'll file with Travis County Recorder within the hour. The 3-year look-back period for fraudulent transfers doesn't apply since your brother surrendered all claims voluntarily this morning. She gathered the documents into a leather portfolio and handed them to Hendrix. Congratulations! You're now a landowner, patent holder, and beneficiary of significant licensing revenue. Hendrix held the portfolio like it might evaporate. He looked at me, silent question in his eyes. Why? At Texas Instruments, I designed systems with triple redundancy. If the primary circuit failed, backup engaged. If backup failed, tertiary engaged. Eleanor had designed the same redundancy for our family. If Wayne stayed honest, no clause needed. If Wayne betrayed me, Hendrix protected him. If Hendrix protected me, consequences activated automatically. 3-layer failsafe written in accountant's handwriting. We walked out of Rachel's office into the lobby. Late afternoon sun came through the tall windows, catching dust motes in golden light. I reached into my flannel jacket pocket, the same jacket I'd worn to Thanksgiving, to every meeting with Opal, to the surrender negotiation this morning, and pulled out a yellowed envelope. The paper was old corners soft from 2 years in my desk drawer, before I'd moved it to my jacket last week. The date on the front, written in Eleanor's precise accountant's script, March 14th, 2019. Your mother wrote this 7 years ago, I said, handing it to Hendrix. Read the last line. Hendrix opened the envelope, carefully unfolded the single page inside. His eyes moved down the text, legal language trust fund, specifications, beneficiary designations, until he reached the final paragraph. He read it once silently, then aloud, his voice shaking. If Alfred Norris is threatened or undermined by any family member, and Hendrix Norris acts as his protector or defender, the entire trust fund held in account 7743-8821 shall transfer unconditionally and immediately to Hendrix Norris, free of all restrictions effective upon first act of protection. He looked up at me. Mom knew this would happen. Your mother was a Texas Instruments accountant for 20 years, I said. She didn't believe in luck. She believed in contingency planning. She wrote this in 2019? Hendrix was staring at the date. 3 years before Wayne started lying to you. 5 years before she died. How did she know? She knew Wayne since he was born. Watched him choose shortcuts over integrity from age 12. The first time he cheated on a chemistry exam, and I caught him, he was more upset about getting caught than about cheating. Your mother saw that. She didn't predict this exact scenario. She just prepared for the possibility that someday one son might need protection from the other. Hendrix carefully folded the paper, the creases following Eleanor's original folds, like a map back to 2019. He put it in his breast pocket over his heart. I will keep Nova 1 safe, Dad, he said quietly, the way Mom intended. I nodded. Hendrix held the yellowed paper against his chest, his mother's handwriting from March 14th of 2019, 5 years before her death, 7 years before this moment. Eleanor had been gone 20 months, but standing in the notary office lobby with winter sun slanting through tall windows, I felt her presence as clearly as if she were standing beside us. Some mothers protect their children from danger. Eleanor had protected hers through it. Your mother won this war from her grave, I said. We walked out into late afternoon Texas sun. Hendrix's hand stayed over his breast pocket where Eleanor's note rested. The surrender was signed. The assets were transferred. The contingency clause was activated. Eleanor Norris, accountant and mother and strategic planner, had built the failsafe that saved us all. Eleanor's note stayed in Hendrix's breast pocket for 2 weeks. I saw him touch it sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking, checking that it was still there, that his mother's foresight was still real. Wednesday, March 5th. Opal Dunn spread 2 manila folders on the conference table, one labeled Criminal Prosecution, the other Supervised Labor Agreement, and asked me the question I'd been avoiding since Wayne signed the surrender clause. What do you want to happen to Wayne? I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows watching the Colorado River snake through downtown Austin, 18 floors below. The question felt heavier than it should have. Criminal prosecution. Opal said, tapping the first folder. Gives us 3 charges: fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, tax evasion. Federal prosecutor I spoke with estimates 5 to 7 years minimum security facility. Wayne would serve 3 with good behavior. She opened the second folder. Labor agreement, 5 years working at an entity managed by Hendrix. Texas minimum wage, first year $7.25 per hour. All salary minus basic living expenses goes into a compensation fund until the judgment is satisfied. After year 1, graduated wage increases contingent on performance and Hendrix's approval. I turned from the window. What does prison teach someone? Opal removed her reading glasses. The gesture I'd learned meant she was switching from attorney to advisor. Depends who you ask. Prosecutors say accountability. Defense attorneys say resentment. Social workers say survival skills that have nothing to do with rehabilitation. What do you say? I say it depends on the person. Some people need the shock. Others just need to understand what they destroyed. She paused. Wayne destroyed trust. Prison doesn't teach trust. It teaches the opposite. I sat down across from her, hands folded on the mahogany table. Prison teaches toughness, I said slowly, working through the logic the way I'd debug a circuit. How to be harder on the world, but working under the man he tried to destroy, watching his younger brother succeed. Every day while he earns minimum wage, that's real punishment. That's accountability you can't avoid by acting tough. What is punishment for? I'd asked myself this since Thanksgiving, sitting in this same office watching the Colorado River flow, remembering Wayne's face when the 26.6 million appeared on my laptop screen. Revenge felt good for maybe 90 seconds, but watching Wayne understand what he'd destroyed, that required time. 5 years of time. Would Eleanor agree with this choice? Opal asked. I stood, walked back to the window. Downtown Austin stretched out below the Capitol Dome, the University Tower, the hill country rolling west toward the ranch Eleanor had loved. She's the one who came up with the trust fund clause. She always believed in the possibility of change, but only if people paid the price long enough to understand why. And if Wayne doesn't change, then at least Hendrix gets 5 years of cheap labor and the judgment satisfied. Either way, justice. Opal closed the criminal prosecution folder and opened her laptop. I'll draft the supervised labor agreement. Court date is April 1st. Tuesday, April 1st, 10 a.m., Federal Courthouse, downtown Austin. I wasn't there. Hendrix went alone, his choice my agreement. Some moments a son needs to face without his father watching. The court clerk read the judgment in a conference room on the 3rd floor. Wayne sat at a table with David Rodriguez Hendrix across from them with Opal. No jury, no gallery, no drama. Just legal consequences delivered in bureaucratic monotone. Defendant's real property at 4217 Westlake Boulevard and 3 registered vehicles. 2023 Mercedes S-Class, 2022 Porsche, Cayenne 20-21, BMW 7 Series, hereby foreclosed and sold at public auction to satisfy civil judgment of $780,000 plus court costs and attorney fees. Wayne signed the acknowledgement. His hand didn't shake anymore. By April, I think he'd run out of emotions except resignation. The employment agreement came next. 5 pages, single-spaced. Hendrix had drafted it with Opal's help terms, so specific there was no room for interpretation. Year 1, minimum wage, 40 hours weekly duties, as assigned by supervising manager Alfred Norris. Performance reviews quarterly. Wage increases conditional. Termination for cause forfeits all graduated compensation. Wayne read every page this time. When he reached the signature line, he looked at Hendrix for the first time that morning. 5 years, Wayne said quietly. Minimum wage, under Hendrix. Hendrix's voice was level, neither cruel nor kind. First day is Monday, 8 a.m. Don't be late. Wayne signed. Gwendolyn received her portion in the same hearing. Equitable asset distribution, acknowledging her IRS cooperation and evidence provision. The court granted her 60% of marital assets accumulated during the marriage exclusive of Wayne's civil judgment obligations. She'd already moved to a townhouse in South Austin and started working as a financial consultant. I'd had coffee with her the week before. She looked lighter somehow, like she'd been carrying weight she hadn't realized until it was gone. At 10:47 a.m., I was at Hill Country Ranch tilling the garden behind the house. Old country radio playing from the workshop, Willie Nelson singing about time slipping away. The soil was dark and cold winter still releasing its grip on the hill country even in early April. My phone rang, Hendrix calling from the courthouse parking lot. Dad, it's done. McMansion foreclosed car's gone. Wayne signed the 5-year agreement. First day is Monday. I pushed the shovel into earth, felt it catch on a root, pushed harder. The carrots are almost ready. Coming home for dinner this weekend. Silence on the other end. Then you're gardening the court, just carrots, I said, pulling the shovel free, starting a new row. Eleanor always planted them in fall. She said they needed cold soil to be sweet. Something about the frost breaking down starches into sugars. Science and patience. I pushed the shovel back and felt the resistance to give. I pushed metal through dark Texas soil and remembered Eleanor's hands doing this same motion 30 autumns. Planting carrots in October cold because sweetness requires suffering first. 3 years I'd been in cold soil. But standing in March sun with Hendrix calling to say it's done, I understood the cold hadn't destroyed me. It had made me sweeter. I've also experienced cold soil these 3 years, I said quietly. Maybe that's how we get sweeter. Hendrix was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. I'll be home Friday evening. For carrots. I hung up and looked at the tilled rose shovel handle warm in my palm, despite the cold soil below. Friday came with carrots almost ready, and soil warming under April sun. Hendrix called at 4:03 p.m. with news that made me smile. The email had arrived at his inbox 16 minutes earlier. Subject line, formal apology and revised offer. TechFlow leadership. He read me the first paragraph over the phone, his voice carrying an edge of something between vindication and exhaustion. We deeply regret the improper reference checking procedures that affected your candidacy in November 2025. After internal review and personnel action, we would like to extend a revised offer. Senior architect position compensation package. 25% higher than our original offer. Comprehensive benefits. Immediate start date available. Hendrix paused. I replied 10 minutes ago. I appreciate the offer, but I've accepted another position. Best regards. I was standing in the ranch kitchen with cold tea, same spot where I'd taken his call about the viral post going live in January. How did that feel? Satisfying for about 30 seconds, he said. Then just sad. They're offering me 25% more than what they wouldn't pay me 3 months ago. Vernon's gone. Wayne's exposed, and they think a salary increase fixes it. What position did you accept? I asked, though I suspected from his tone he'd been waiting for me to ask. That's the good part, Hendrix said. Wednesday morning, I got a call from Vertex Systems. Their CEO read my LinkedIn case study. The day it posted, forwarded it to their board that afternoon. Vertex Systems. TechFlow's biggest competitor, twice the size, 3 times the R&D budget. I'd worked with their engineering team on a signal processing contract in 2014. Good people. Better ethics. What did they offer? CTO, Chief Technology Officer. I told him I was applying for senior engineering roles. He said anyone who documents sabotage that thoroughly defends their father, that publicly, and builds that technical a case that's not engineering, that's leadership. I set down my tea. CTO, 3% equity. Salary 45% higher than TechFlow's original offer, not the revised one. They want me to start May 1st. TechFlow had thrown Hendrix away in November. Like a faulty circuit board, too much effort to debug, easier to replace. But Vertex Systems had read the diagnostic report Hendrix published, saw the engineering precision in his documentation, and realized this isn't a broken component. This is the engineer who documents everything perfectly. That's the person you hire. Nova 1 CTO and Nova 1 patent? I said. Your mother would say that's not coincidence, that's poetry. Hendrix laughed to sound lighter than I'd heard in months. Not bad for someone who sold a car last month. About that car, I said, walking to my office where the laptop sat open to the banking portal I'd been reviewing. Check your account tomorrow morning. Dad, you don't have to. It's already done. Exact amount for a brand new 2025 Mustang GT. No note, no explanation needed. You sold it to save Nova 1. Nova 1 just paid you back. Silence on the other end, then quiet "thank you." We hung up at 4:47 p.m. At 11:34 p.m. that night, I executed the transfer, $58,340 from the Lockheed Martin licensing account into Hendrix's checking. The memo field I left blank. Some gifts don't need explanation. But I'm getting ahead of the chronology. Let me go back to Tuesday night, April 1st, the same day the court ruled, and Hendrix called me from the parking lot about carrots. 10 o'clock p.m. I sat at the old desk in our bedroom. Eleanor's desk, originally cherrywood she'd bought at an estate sale in 1999, and refinished herself over 3 weekends. The cedar box sat in front of me, brass hinges tarnished but still smooth. Inside were 44 letters, handwritten, one per year since I met Eleanor at the Texas Instruments holiday party in 1981. Some years the letters were 2 pages, some years 10. The year she died, 12 pages, front and back, written over 3 weeks in hospice while she slept. I opened the cedar box and counted without meaning to 44 letters stacked chronologically, my handwriting evolving from engineer's block print to something softer over 45 years. And every year somehow I heard her answer. Not her voice, her logic, her accountant's precision applied to human problems. This year 6 pages. Blue ballpoint on yellow legal paper recounting everything from Thanksgiving dinner to today's court ruling. I wrote about Wayne's surrender, Hendrix's protection, Gwendolyn's choice, Vernon's cooperation, about the viral post, the asset transfer, the supervised labor agreement. The last paragraph took 20 minutes to write correctly. My dear, I relearned something you taught me. I forgot, after you left, loving someone doesn't mean protecting them from consequences. That's not cruelty, that's respect. Wayne needed consequences he couldn't manipulate away. Hendrix needed to see that protecting family isn't weakness. And I needed to remember that engineering systems and engineering justice follow the same principles, document everything, trust the process, let the evidence speak. Nova One will continue to live in Hendrix's hands, as you wished when you wrote that trust fund clause in 2019. You saw this possibility 3 years before Wayne's first lie, 5 years before your death. I promise to honor your foresight the way you honored my patents, by trusting that good work survives the people who create it. 45 years, still writing to you, still hearing your answers. The carrots are almost ready. You were right about the cold soil. With all my love, Alfred. I folded the letter following the creases from 44 previous folds, placed it in the cedar box on top of the others. The stack was getting thick. 45 letters. 45 years of conversation that death hadn't ended, just changed format. I closed the cedar box, turned off the desk lamp. The room went dark, hill country. Darkness, the kind without city light pollution, where stars filled the windows and silence filled everything else. I sat still in that darkness, not sleeping, not thinking, just sitting. This was the first quiet moment in 3 months where nothing awaited me. No lawsuit, no strategy, no demand letter, countdown, no surrender clause negotiation, only silence. And silence, I realized, was something I'd been missing a very long time. Silence became something I learned to keep. 6 months of it, from April through October, while carrots grew sweet, and Wayne worked construction under Hendrix's management. The old Ford pickup turned onto the Hill Country Ranch gravel drive at 4:03 p.m. on a warm October afternoon. 8 months after the settlement, 8 months of silence between us, and I recognized the vehicle before I saw the driver. Wayne's Mercedes had been auctioned in April. This truck was older than Hendrix primer gray construction company logo on the door. I was on the back porch with cold tea when I heard the gravel crunch. Walked around front. Wayne had parked under the live oak but hadn't gotten out. Just sat there in the cab, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the house. Finally he opened the door. Construction jeans, faded polo work boots with concrete dust. His hair had more gray than I remembered. Hands were calloused, shoulders broader from 8 months of physical labor. He didn't knock. Just sat down on the porch steps and waited. I came out 5 minutes later. He stood when he heard the screen door, stepped down off the porch and dropped to one knee on the concrete walkway. Dad. His voice was flat, weary, stripped of the performance I'd heard for 3 years. I'm not asking forgiveness today. I know it's not the right time yet. I just want you to know I'm beginning to understand. I stood there holding my tea glass condensation cool against my palm. Watched my older son kneeling on concrete his mother had helped pour in 1996. Not because the court mandated it, Wayne continued, but because every day I work under Hendrix, I see things I hadn't seen before. How he treats the crew, how he solves problems, how he gives people second chances when they're 10 minutes late, but fires them instantly if they lie about why. The screen door opened behind me. Hendrix, hands in pockets, leaning against the doorframe. "Stand up, Wayne," I said. "We don't kneel in this family. We look each other in the eye." Wayne stood slowly, knees stiff from kneeling on concrete, met my gaze. His eyes were different than Thanksgiving. No calculation, no manipulation, just exhaustion, and something that might have been the beginning of honesty. Hendrix spoke from the doorway. "He's been on time every day for 8 months. Not once late. That's something." "Is it?" I asked Wayne. "Yes," he said simply. "It's something." 1 week later, Sunday afternoon in late October, first family dinner since Thanksgiving. Eleanor's wooden table sat on the back porch, overlooking the lake. Same table we'd used for 30 years of Sunday meals. I'd set it with her 1907 china white, with blue trim, 3 pieces, chipped, irreplaceable. The food came from my garden tomatoes, squashed the carrots that had survived winter cold to turn sweet in spring. Gwendolyn arrived at 3. She'd brought homemade rolls, the recipe Eleanor taught her in 2015. Hendrix came at 3:15 with a pecan pie from the bakery Eleanor loved in Dripping Springs. Wayne arrived last at 3:30, exactly carrying nothing but showing up on time. Conversation started reserved, careful. But food has a way of softening edges. "How's the Vertex Systems infrastructure project?" Gwendolyn asked Hendrix, buttering a roll. "I read about the Austin contract in the Statesman." "We're ahead of schedule," Hendrix said. Wayne's crew finished the foundation work 2 weeks early. Saved the city $40,000. Wayne didn't respond, just ate his carrots quietly. I watched Wayne's back at the kitchen sink. Later faded polo, stretched across broader shoulders from 8 months' construction work, salt and pepper hair catching afternoon light, calloused hands scrubbing Eleanor's china with dish soap he'd found under the sink without asking. This wasn't the Wayne from Thanksgiving, wasn't the Wayne from the settlement. This was someone learning what it meant to serve instead of take. Imperfect. Real. This isn't perfect family, I thought. This is real family? When everyone left, I sat on the back porch until dark. Watched the lake turn from blue to black. Listened to crickets and the occasional bass breaking the surface. Next morning, 6 a.m., I was on the same porch with coffee when my phone buzzed. Email from Lockheed Martin sent 5:47 a.m. Subject Nova 1 Series 2. Application proposal. To Hendrix Norris, Chief Technology Officer, Vertex Systems. CC Alfred Norris, original patent holder. I read the first paragraph. Next generation smart infrastructure application. 5-year development timeline. Hendrix's team as primary contractor. Me CC'd as reference respected elder patent originator. Not owner, not decision maker. Just the person who built the first one and passed it forward. I typed slowly on my phone. Eleanor would have loved this. Alfred Norris, retired. Ask Hendrix. Sent it. Set the phone down, picked up my coffee. If you asked me last Thanksgiving what I was fighting for, I would have said justice. In January, I would have said vindication. In April, I would have said accountability. But sitting here, watching October, sun break over Texas Hill. Country coffee cooling in my left-hand phone, silent in my right. I understand now what Eleanor understood when she wrote that trust fund clause in 2019. Eleanor's china on the table last night. Eleanor's garden vegetables in the meal. Eleanor's trust fund clause protecting Hendrix. Eleanor's patent going to Series 2 under Hendrix's leadership. Eleanor's forgiveness philosophy lets Wayne kneel and stand and try again. Sometimes people think what they're protecting is money or honor, or even love. But what I've really protected all these months from Thanksgiving dinner, through surrender clause, through supervised labor agreement, through Sunday family meal, is proof that Eleanor Norris existed loved and built something sustainable enough to continue living after she's gone. The ranch, the patents, the family dinner tradition, the china, the carrots planted in fall cold, the trust fund clause that saw 3 years into the future, the wisdom that loving someone means letting them face consequences. All of it, Eleanor. All of it still here. All of it continuing. I set down my empty coffee cup and stood joints stiff from sitting body, reminding me I was 64 and retired, and exactly where I wanted to be. The lake reflected the first sunlight like a mirror, the same lake Eleanor watched from this porch for 30 years, the same lake that would be here long after I was gone. Morning began like any other, quiet sufficient entirely mine. And to you listening to my story, remember this. For 3 years I watched Wayne manipulate and steal, while I documented everything. Some might say I should have confronted him sooner, but I learned that patience isn't weakness, it's preparation. The hardest lesson. Accepting that my son chose this path and that loving him meant letting him face the full consequences. What I want you to take from this dad revenge family story isn't bitterness, it's wisdom. When facing family betrayal, revenge document everything. Trust your instincts. I believe God allowed this trial to teach me that justice doesn't require rage. It requires evidence and patience. Dad revenge family situations aren't about destruction. They're about restoration. And if you're dealing with family, betrayal, revenge, yourself know. This truth has patience. It will wait until you're ready. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you experienced something similar? Would you have handled it differently? Drop a comment below and let me know. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want more stories, like this, subscribe to Dad's Sweet Revenge. I'll be here every week. Thank you for staying until the very end. I know these stories aren't easy, but they matter. One final note. While this story is based on real experiences, certain details have been adjusted for privacy and storytelling. What remains true is the lesson, and I hope it serves you well.